Majority Report with Sam Seder, where every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday, Tuesday, Casual Tuesday, Wednesday, Casual Hump Day, Thursday, Casual Thurs, that's what we call it, and Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday, December 7th, 2018. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, it's Casual Friday. Also, my sister's birthday. Happy birthday, Betsy. And joining us to celebrate my sister's birthday and the end of the week, David Dayen will be in studio. Also on the program today, Bill Barr, a smarter Jeff Sessions, to be nominated to the Attorney General of the United States of America. White House Chief of Sociopath John Kelly to be resigning soon. Michigan Republicans assault democracy Wisconsin style. And North Carolina's 9th Congressional District election fraud case boils over. Meanwhile, 2 big Mueller filings to drop later today. One on Manafort, one on Cohen. May tell us stuff, may not. And Trump to nominate a former Fox and Friends host to be the UN ambassador. Mm-hmm. Senate confirms a new head to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau who has zero experience with consumers or financial protection. And probably bureaus, for that matter. F you, Paul Lepage, says judge. Medicaid expansion will go forward. I'm not sure the judge said exactly those words. Written. Yep.
That was a great ruling.
More on the Postal Report. And Joe Manchin creeping closer to becoming the minority leader on energy and the face of Democratic fight against climate change. And lastly, the biggest questions for the new House to be answered today, arguably, on this version of the Majority Report. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is Casual Friday. It is also my sister's birthday. Once again, happy birthday, Betsy. David Dayen is in studio with us. We will be with you in just a moment. It's very exciting to have you in studio, and we said we haven't quite figured out. Well, hello, David.
Oh, hello.
Yeah, I
How
don't
are
want to
you?
make you.
I didn't know if I was ready to come on yet.
No, you're ready.
Okay.
Hey, I don't know, David, if you remember Rex Tillerson.
I do.
Yeah, he was the former Secretary of State. People are very excited that he came out in public to. I don't think he properly maligned Donald Trump, but he did it in that sort of like genteel way. Here he is with Bob Schaefer of CBS News. Bob Schaefer, obviously, he loves these. He's also from Texas, but he's a big. I don't know. He has a very good relationship, it seems like, with anybody who has oil. And the Bushes, he was good friends with. And here he is. It's unclear to me like what event it is. I don't know. Some local. I'm sure it has to do with get rich quick scheme type of situation down there. But here is Bob Schaefer and Rex Tillerson talking about Donald Trump.
You describe Donald Trump.
Well, most of you probably know some of this, but I had never met Donald Trump until the day he asked me to be Secretary of State.
Pause
He
it.
acts on his...
So in other words, I can't be held responsible for anything that I did. I claim I have total plausible deniability, right? Like, no one knew who Donald Trump was.
Right.
Until at least after the inauguration, right? I mean, really, you had the guy...
He just sprung it on us.
It was completely,
He was such a kindly man from the TV.
Of course.
Before.
As Joe and Mika said, like, he always used to be in on the joke. And now, but all right, let's hear Rex Tillerson continue to try and whitewash his culpability in this disaster.
Be Secretary of State. He acts on his instincts. In some respects, that looks like impulsiveness, but it's not his intent to act on impulse. I think he really is trying to act on his instincts.
Yes,
It's challenging for me, coming from the disciplined, highly process-oriented ExxonMobil Corporation, to go to work for a man who is pretty undisciplined, doesn't like to read, doesn't read briefing reports, doesn't like to get into the details of a lot of things, but rather just kind of says, look, this is what I believe.
In other words, he just makes stuff up, and he doesn't want to be impulsive, but he doesn't have control of his impulses, so he is impulsive.
Right.
That is definitionally
That's
impulsive.
acting without intention is, in fact, acting on impulse.
You know who also strikes me as not quite as bright as we might have given him credit for? Rex Tillerson.
To be fair, I never met him I never heard him until just now.
Until
so
just
I can't
now.
say
Can't say
that
whether
he's
you've
a complete idiot.
judged him in any way.
Convoluted way of calling somebody an effing moron.
Can anybody remember the pseudonym he was using?
Oh yeah.
No,
I just remembered I can't remember it.
no, I don't.
I can't remember it either. Wow.
Wasn't his main breakdown with Trump though?
Wayne Tracker.
Wayne Tracker, that's right. Wait, now where was he using that pseudonym? Was he like a sock? It was sock puppet. Like
Going into hotels because they were his teeny boppers were after him. Why was he using a pseudonym?
I can't remember what it was.
He was the one who got really upset with Trump's address to the Boy Scouts, which was
That's right.
a little questionable to talk about, like
Hot tubs.
hot tub parties with the Boy Scouts. But this guy
Could all be yours.
He used Wayne Tracker to discuss climate in emails.
Oh yeah, of course. There you go. I can't wait for that lawsuit. Folks, today one of our sponsors is Skillshare. And the first 500 people who go to skl.sh/majority, and like we said, now you're probably down to like $4.98 after we talk about it on the show. With David Dayen right now, headed right over to skl.sh/majority, are going to get 2 whole months of totally free access to Skillshare's entire library of super quality online courses and tutorials. Skillshare is a vibrant online learning community. It offers courses on everything from design to video editing, photography, business, technology, cooking, meditation, and everything in between. There are Skillshare courses for everyone. You'll have no problem finding courses that's going to be useful for you both in your personal and your professional life. Whether you want to sharpen your skills with something you already love doing, or you want to learn to do something, totally new, Skillshare has you covered. They have courses for entrepreneurs, courses on computer coding, web development, personal nutrition, learning new languages, Photoshop, you name it. I got to make a note of that. I've been checking out their courses. Like I said, I went through the knife cutting one because I wanted to learn. There's actually like you cut against the grain on certain things, and the taste of food changes on how you cut it and how it cooks as to what juices comes out.
All right.
Yeah.
It also just looks impressive when you're using a knife, right?
Yes. You gotta go slow, or you're gonna lose a
Sam's
finger.
got to impress somebody.
I got to impress people with my knife skills. Also, I took that Google Analytics course, but as soon as I just saw Photoshop, that's the next one I think I'm going to do. Get some Photoshop skills going. You can get 2 entire months of free access to every single course offered by Skillshare by going to skl.sh/majority. Just think of everything you'll have at your fingertips for 2 whole months. I feel like you could probably go through every single video, David, based upon
I'm
your
looking
work
up right
ethic.
now, radio guest.
Again, that's skl.sh/majority. We've got a link in the podcast description, a link on the YouTube. Check it out. Also, reminder, 2018 has been a difficult year for human rights, but have you ever wondered how rights abuses are documented around the world? You probably have. With the sheer volume of global crises we're seeing, from civilian casualties in Syria to ethnic cleansing in Myanmar to the caging of children on U.S. borders, it's critical that we expose the truth in order to defend the rights of all and bring those responsible to justice. Human Rights Watch does just that. They are independent, nonprofit organization known for their accurate fact-finding, impartial reporting, and targeted advocacy, often in partnership with local activists and human rights groups. They accept no money from any government. They rely on the support of informed, dedicated people just like you. So if human rights are important to you, visit hrw.org/majority to make a donation and support its vital work around the world. When you do, not only is your gift tax deductible, it'll be matched dollar for dollar until 2019. That means your donation will go twice as far to advance justice and defend the basic dignity of people who need it most. Again, that's hrw.org/majority. Last night, we had charity night for this we do for one night of Hanukkah. Kids don't get a present. They can divide up the cash they would have gotten amongst charities. HRW, the Human Rights Watch was one of those.
Nicely done.
Did a couple others. Oxfam. We did the Pacific Immigration Center, which we now do every year. But that's a different story. So, David, all right, let's get to this week in review. There's a couple things. Let's talk about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, because I know that's in your wheelhouse. I want to get, obviously, to what's going on in Michigan and, Michigan and Wisconsin. We spoke to Ari Berman earlier in the week, and things have simply progressed on the same trajectory, but we'll get to that in a moment. But let's talk about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, because this was, up until about 2 years ago, considered by many to be one of the most successful agencies, I don't know if in the history of the U.S. government, but certainly in modern times, and because of the way that it was financed, right? I mean, and personnel. Tell us why.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the financing, and the point of that is that it was not financed through congressional appropriations, so you couldn't have the money spigot turned off. It was funded through the Federal Reserve, which guaranteed its resources. I think more so the reason that CFPB has been successful is because of sort of the way the agency was imagined. This is an agency with a mission that is entirely and singularly to protect consumers. Previously, these laws that it has jurisdiction and oversight over were put into agencies that had other missions, safety and soundness of the banks, things like that. And they were sort of at cross purposes with this mission of, making sure consumers are getting a fair shake on these very important financial transactions.
It's probably designed that way on some level, right?
Absolutely.
It's sort of like a mitigating, like a built-in,
right?
Like the critique is built into the into the product.
And so you're weighing those two missions, and usually it comes out on the side of the group with the most money and the most power and influence. This was distributed differently and was also staffed differently. I mean, as you recall, for the first year, Elizabeth Warren was the person who stood up this agency, and she built the organizational chart. She created the ways in which the priorities were made for this agency. She staffed the agency at the very beginning. A lot of those people were still there through the first term of Richard Cordray, who was sort of the hand-picked director. And so all of those things, I think, came together. It was seen as a new agency. It was vibrant. It brought people in who had a public service mission. So there were a lot of reasons why there were, it was set up for success. And it was successful to a degree. I mean, I don't want to overstate it. There were some things I think that CFPB did where they kind of kept their powder dry, pulled their punches a little bit in rulemaking. But generally a successful agency until last Thanksgiving when Richard Cordray left to unsuccessfully run for governor of Ohio. And Mick Mulvaney, who was moonlighting, he was the he was the White House budget director, who would come in 3 days a week to screw up the CFPB.
Much easier when you're screwing something up. It's much easier to do
be
it
a short
just
timer.
3 days a week.
You can be like a 9 to 3 banker.
Yeah, exactly.
Go out on the golf course after you destroy this agency.
Steal a
I mean,
horse
on
for
some
it.
level, I mean, I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but on some level, that is the entire sort of conservative project, right? And to get into government, destroy it, and it's it's so hard to be incompetent at being incompetent. Like, I mean, if you're
Not quite, though, because I've actually heard from some people that Mulvaney, I mean, we talk about Kathy Kraninger. She's the woman who was confirmed yesterday, and how she has no consumer protection experience whatsoever. And that's absolutely true. But it's not like Mulvaney did, right? I mean, he was a congressman. He had no executive agency experience before this. He was a budget director. That's a very different thing than consumer financial protection. I'm not sure he was even on the Financial Services Committee in Congress. He was certainly a critic of CFPB, but that was mainly because of, who was coming into his office. So he actually did not know the mechanisms by which he could, particularly on rulemaking, how he could undo those rules. So he would say to people in the office, hey, I want to get rid of this payday rule. And they'd be like, yeah, all right. And then they just kind of wouldn't do it.
Right.
So on rulemaking, he has not been quite as successful. Where Mulvaney was very successful is in enforcement.
Right.
And, the Washington Post this week put out a pretty long article showing that enforcement was down 75%. It took several months for any enforcement actions to be brought by the agency. There's this thing that the Washington Post attributed to people at the agency, but I wrote it 6 months earlier, called the Mulvaney discount. And the Mulvaney discount is these various enforcement actions where there would just be a reduction in the penalty.
That's the easiest thing to do, right? You get
Exactly.
it comes on your desk, and it's like sign off on this $300 million penalty, and you go, you know what? I'm gonna drop this down to 25.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what we call this.
And that's exactly what was done. On up till today, I
Was there an algorithm, or was it just he just picked a number he liked?
Literally
90% reduction.
Literally, they would say in the enforcement documents that, initially we wanted $6 million, but we don't feel like this company that ripped off people has the ability to pay that. So we're going to drop it to $200,000. I mean, that's almost verbatim in some of these documents. Going on up to yesterday, the day that Kraninger gets confirmed, CFPB did an enforcement action against State Farm Bank, the insurance company, but they also have a bank. And it was about credit reporting errors. They would report to credit reporting agencies incorrect information about customers.
Well, that's not a big deal for you to get a reduced credit score.
Right.
So much for the house or the car that you wanted, or the loan to help your kid go to school, or whatever it is.
So they reported this incorrect information, never corrected it. We're delayed in actually getting that information out and finally reversing it. Ruined credit scores, and the enforcement action. And I'm not being hyperbolic. This was the enforcement action. Promise not to do it again. It was $0.
Do they have to do that in writing, or they just
in writing? The
well,
compliance.
okay.
There's compliance around not doing it again. $0 in fines. $0 in restitution to these people who had their credit scores ruined.
Wow.
And that was the enforcement. So, there's a sense that, oh, Kraninger's coming in, she has no experience, she's just going to ruin the agency. Ruin it from what? I mean, right. Mulvaney has already really
they do seem
to
have a scheme to do this. But let me just also interject. From your perspective, right, there's no punishment for that agency. But I think libertarian philosophy tells us that, of course, consumers will stop going to that agency because they did this, and they'll go out of State Farm Bank. They will go out of business now.
Right. So you'll never see State Farm commercials anymore.
Right. State Farm Bank will go out of business because why would people, why would anybody use them if they were doing that?
It's the discipline of the market. Is what you're talking about.
Exactly.
So
I should just add, I'm being facetious. There was a half dozen people out there.
So Kraninger gets confirmed. Yes, she obviously
thanks to Susan Collins,
woefully unqualified. A 50-49 decision. So all Democrats voted against this, and only and I guess Tom Tillis was absent yesterday for some reason or another, which means it was 50-49. So any one of the Republicans could have voted the other way, and she would not have
because
been
even
confirmed.
if Mike Pence came down to vote, right,
50-49, it wouldn't have mattered. I mean, if Tillis is gone,
oh, he's going to break a tie, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if it was 49-50,
right,
nomination fails. Now there is a sense that it's not necessarily a good thing that Kraninger has been confirmed, but consider the alternative. So Mulvaney's there in an interim capacity. This is a 5-year term, and it's independent of who is in the White House. So Kraninger is confirmed today, December 2018. It has a 5-year term, will be there till December 2023, which means regardless of whoever becomes president in 2020.
That's so depressing.
Kraninger is allowed to be there. Now she's there is a possibility to do a for-cause removal of the CFPB directors.
Like you're
obviously
not doing your job?
Obviously never been done before,
right.
Because it's a new agency. But that's an option. If you have a President Warren, maybe she tries to do something like that. But it's a little dicey. I mean, you don't know if that's going to happen. So,
but at the very least, President Democrat who might win in 2020 will have the opportunity to appoint someone, as opposed to if this had gone 5 years.
But think about the alternative. So think about what if the courts decide, well, no, you can't. This isn't a cause. You can't fire them. So right now, Kraninger's there till December 2023. If they voted her down and Mulvaney just stays there and does the lack of enforcement he's doing, and they don't fill it until the end of Trump's turn, then it's it's another couple years out.
Right.
So there was a school of thought that, let's confirm this person as quick as we can to get her out of there.
Right. It almost would have been better to do this a year ago because you just want to get it over as quickly as possible instead of.
That's a school of thought, but you can see it both ways.
Okay. Let's just, before we move on to a different topic, Mick Mulvaney is saying that according to the charter, essentially, of this agency, that its name is not really the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It is the Bureau of Consumer
Financial Protection.
Yes. Now, this is nuts. So he wants to change it to reflect the real name, which is going to require all of these companies, financial entities that file with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to refile with the Bureau of Consumer Financial Protection.
Right.
And at a cost of somewhere around $300 million.
There was, just to be clear, there was a CFPB report that was put out to say what is the effect of the name change, both on the agency, which obviously has lots of forms and things, and moving the B number from the beginning to the end. What's amazing about this is that he's literally taking consumers and not putting them first. I mean, that's literally what he's doing by doing that. So So they did this report to show, how much is this going to cost the agency, and then how much is it going to cost the firms who then have to do all these changes in their databases, changes in their compliance forms, and things like that. And yes, what they showed is that it would cost the agency $19 million just to change the name, and it would cost regulated firms, regulated by the agency, up to $300 million.
And the purpose of this is to show how bad this agency is, right? Like that it's making people, it's causing unnecessary waste.
Yes, there's a sense that that's the point. Like the point is to cost $300 million to show how silly it is. But there's also just this like bizarre, like, well, actually what I found is that they've been naming it wrong. These stupid liberals have named it wrong this entire time.
It's just bizarre.
Elizabeth Warren's bad at naming things.
But I mean, I think the idea
By the way,
is...
Mick Mulvaney Mick is not his name. Mick is a nickname. His name is John Michael Mulvaney, and he's saying, this is ridiculous that we're not using the statutory real name of the Consumer Financial Protection.
But it's not, he's not doing this out of like some type of OCD. He's doing this because they want to further create animosity towards the agency and create an argument that this is an agency that's out of control and it's bad, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, this is sort of like, it seems to me, equivalent to the way that a Republican Congress deals with the postal office, right? It's like, you have no control over what you're doing. We're going to impose upon you certain obligations. You're going to have to pay out. You're going to have to fully fund your pensions system and your healthcare system for a 75-year horizon to pay for postal workers' retirement for postal workers who aren't even born yet.
Right.
It has to be fully paid.
Right.
There's no other entity, maybe in the world, that imposes that requirement on themselves or is imposed on that.
Right.
And it doesn't give the Postal Service an ability to deal with it. It's just a way to inhibit and kneecap them.
There's a somewhat alternate point in that Mulvaney's argument has been that CFPB is out of control. They have gone well beyond their statutory objectives. Nobody's reading the statutory language except me, John Michael Mulvaney, and they have overreached beyond the legislative intent. So what he's really saying is, you have so ignored the legislative intent of this agency that you're not even naming it right. See here in this language that you've never read that it's wrong. The irony is that the Dodd-Frank Act refers to the Bureau of Consumer Financial Protection and also refers to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau in different parts of the statute.
Calls them the same thing
so there's
differently.
CFPB sometimes and there's BCFP as well. So, under Mulvaney's standard, he could not, for example, the agency is called CFPB in the context of putting the director on the board of the FDIC. So under what Mulvaney's saying, if it's called the Bureau of Consumer Financial Protection, he couldn't be on the FDIC board, right? So
because if you're going to be that literal.
Right,
okay.
exactly.
All right. Well, let's talk about the postal office because there was a postal report put out. This is we're hitting all of the stuff that
The most boring stuff.
Well, it's
we're
not
hitting.
most. Well, it's a little bit drier, but I mean, this stuff is hugely relevant, and people can't get this information anywhere else. The only way they could do is read your Tumblr, and my understanding is that's going away because of the porno thing. So
I will not use eggplant emojis anymore.
Wait, what?
Let's just say that.
What's happening? What?
Tumblr has a new rule about getting rid of adult content, and I made a joke about that.
Sorry, I
because,
didn't know anything about
David
that. Sorry,
Dayen-
Matt.
Basically, all the stuff remaining on Tumblr.
Right, exactly. Okay. And David Dayen's basically home for his clearinghouse of his reported piece.
Side
Links, which
links.
I mean, they've been Tumblr's been flagging things like Taylor Swift sitting on a chair. Like we don't know. This could violate our
Sam,
adult.
There was a flag on the Postal Report.
You're into that, right?
All right, yeah. Oh, totally.
Taylor Swift sitting on a chair.
All right. Well, let's talk about the Postal Report, and then we'll get to what's going on in Michigan and Wisconsin,
Right.
and a little bit. I also want to talk about what's happening in the House. But the Postal Report came out. Who commissioned the report? What were the purposes?
This was a Trump executive order. So Trump put an executive order to start a task force on the future of the U.S. Postal Service, which has been losing money for a variety of different reasons that we'll go into. You mentioned one of them.
That's the biggest one,
the
isn't it?
pre-funding reasons.
Yeah.
I mean, but for that, they would be still, on the road to profitability, if not profitable. But email has degraded the ability of the Postal Service to continue. So this was a task force to determine. And now a lot of people saw it in the context of Trump going after Amazon, saying they were cheating the Postal Service, that they were underpaying for package delivery through the parcel post program. And so this was a task force designed to create recommendations. For the Postal Service, it was seen at the time as sort of a stalking horse for privatization, which we've seen around the world at several postal services. They've privatized their agencies. I would say in the U.S., the Postal Service is a partially privatized agency. It does not get any money from the U.S. government outside of some very minuscule things for government postage. It has a board that's appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate, but they kind of have independent, with some statutory restrictions, but they're kind of independent governance. So the
and for
question
the most part,
was,
don't get taxpayer money.
No, $0.
It's all from
and
the stamps.
so the question was, was this task force going to recommend privatization completely? And it didn't actually recommend privatization, but it recommended something I think much worse.
Really?
And that is the degrading of the universal service obligation. Now, what is the universal service obligation? That means neither sleet nor snow nor dead of night will keep us from reporting rounds. It means that everyone in the country, every residence, every business, no matter where you are, no matter how much it costs to get there, gets mail. The furthest reaches of Alaska, the most rural area in South Dakota, or wherever, you're going to get your mail, and you're going to get it 6 times a week, and you're going to get a standard rate for letters from any part of the country to another, standard rate for packages and things like that. That's the universal service obligation. And what the report said is that we need to redefine the universal service obligation.
Those are my favorite universes, which don't include all of the universe. They're much easier to manage.
Yes, that's right. And there's some contradictions in the report, because the report says that the one thing we don't want to do is hurt rural Americans who rely on the Postal Service, especially because the digital divide is still pretty large. But in practice, all of the things that it wants to do, which is they want to sort of define essential services. So like person-to-person correspondence, bill paying, government mail, transport of pharmaceuticals for some reason is in there. Those things would be essential services. That would still be universal. Everything else, like commercial packages, like from Amazon, would be inessential and then subject to increased rates, and also potentially subject to discontinuance of delivery. The term they use is exiting the business line. So certain packages are like, I'm not going to middle of Alaska with that package. You can't do it in the Postal Service. So that would be, and who would that fall on? Right? It would fall on rural customers.
Of course, because it's going to be most expensive to go to a rural customers. And this is really fundamentally...
Competition would start kicking in.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Competition would start kicking in, and then you would see just
already,
even
by
more
the way,
people not go there.
Already, UPS and FedEx don't deliver to certain places. There's FedEx has a thing called a delivery area surcharge, where if it's a hard-to-get area, they add money to deliver to that particular locality. So that's what you would see, a 2-tiered system, basically. And that
is among other issues. That is one of the fundamental problems with privatization of the Postal Service, is that it is simply not profitable to do. And I don't know if you've seen any numbers to this effect, but there is probably 10 to 15%, maybe more, of what the post office does that almost cannot be profitable. Like
Right.
you cannot have delivery service to the farthest regions of the country and make it profitable.
And when you're thinking about that, you have to think in terms of what is the Postal Service for? Is it for making money for itself and for the United States? Or is it to, as it says in the statute, bind the nation together?
Right.
The whole point is to, give everybody the ability to acquire information, conduct commerce, no matter where you live, no matter who you are, no discrimination against any member of society. You can use the Postal Service. Now, in the 1800s, it was much more vital part of communication. This is why, magazines and newspapers have a reduced rate of delivery,
right,
relative to the other parts of packages and mail. But even today, particularly in these rural areas, it's incredibly important to have reliable mail service. And if you're saying to an area,
particularly because they don't have the same broadband of the internet, because now all of a sudden the digital divide adds to, if you were to diminish postal service, the divide that exists in terms of information because of the digital divide becomes that much even steeper, like and disparate.
So while this didn't call for privatization, it embraces the logic of privatization.
Right.
The logic of, we have to turn a profit, we have to cover our costs on everything that we do, every little business line that we engage in.
If a Democratic president ever called for a report like this, I mean, a report like this was produced during a Democratic administration, first off, I would be upset because it's fundamentally contrary to some of the points of having a Democrat in office. But the New York Times would be writing about how the coastal elites think that the heartland people and rural people are not worth expending any money on. This would be a huge, like, we would hear this in the Senate. This would be the war on Christmas, right? It would be the war on rural people. But because it comes out of the Trump administration, nothing.
And by the way, I mean, it goes further than just not delivering certain packages. It says that it should be easier to close post offices. And where are those post offices going to be closed? There are 31,000 locations in rural areas where it's unprofitable.
Yes.
It talks about slowing down the speed of processing mail in places where it's unprofitable. So maybe you can get your mail in a rural area, but it'll be once a week instead of 6 days a week.
Going back to the Pony Express.
Yeah.
What about drones?
And
you guys are anti-future.
And then it talks about raising, how can we make the Postal Service cover its costs, revenue enhancement options. And it talks about like hunting licenses and fishing licenses you can sell at the post office. But it specifically says
no banking.
Yes, it specifically says expanding. I'll quote here: expanding in the sectors where the USPS does not have a comparative advantage or where balance sheet risk might arise, such as postal banking, should not be pursued.
Now, for folks who are new to the show, if you had listened to this show in like 2014 or 15, you would have heard probably more about postal banking than in any other medium that existed except for print.
It is why your audience was cut in half during that era.
Exactly. And had Hillary Clinton won, this would have been all postal banking all the time. But just briefly remind people why this would be such a great idea.
Right. So in the United States, there are significant amounts of people who have little or no access to banking services. Either they don't have the ability to get a bank account at all, or they have one, but they also use all these alternative sources like pawn shops or payday lenders or whatever. And those services charge extortionate rates. The average is something like, I think it was $2,500 a year in interest and fees on these alternative financial services for the average family. And these are families making $25,000 a year.
Right.
This
It's
is like
insane.
10% of their total income
insane.
just on fees for conducting, being part of the financial system. And in a modern economy, if you're not part of the financial system, you can't get a job or rent a car. There's so many things you can't do. So the idea would be to go back to something we had from 1911 to 1967, where the post office provided a postal savings account that anyone could access that would give you the ability to have an ATM card, that would give you the ability to conduct financial transactions. And it would be a way to promote financial inclusion, which is squarely within the mission of the U.S. Postal Service to bind the nation together. So this would not only help a little bit on the Postal Service's finances. You could charge vastly less for lending services or things like that in terms of interest. So families would save 80%, 90% in fees and interest. But the Postal Service would make a little bit of money, and more important, promote financial inclusion.
After Medicare for all, that's my
that's number 2.
That's number 2 on my bucket list.
But this task force said no, can't do that.
Well, but this task force just is just going to be operative during the Trump years, right? Theoretically, right?
Right. But the logic of it, I think, is going to endure to a certain extent.
I hope so. All right. Well, let's talk about the House. There's 2 things I want to talk about. Where are we on the and I think it was one of your buddies over at The Intercept, Ryan Grimm, who wrote about progressives getting on to, getting 40%. Oh, you wrote that?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
When in doubt, just assume.
I just assume it's you, but then, okay. So you wrote this piece where the Progressive Caucus, and we spoke about it on the show a couple weeks ago. Okay. What's the latest on that? Anything new?
Okay, so just to
AOC
refresh,
is going for the that's what it was.
Ways and Means, yeah.
Grimm,
Ryan wrote about that.
Right about that. Okay.
So, the latest is that the Progressive Caucus, as we talked about, made a deal with Nancy Pelosi. They used their power because Pelosi needs almost every Democrat to vote for her on the floor of the House on January 3rd in order to become Speaker.
Have you heard anything to the effect that she doesn't have that?
Well, I haven't heard definitively that she does have 218 votes, but I think she's moving in that direction. But at the time, a few weeks ago, it was a little bit less clear, and she needed to, sort of give members who were wary, little chits.
Right.
And one of them that the Progressive Caucus secured was proportional representation on these so-called money committees. And what are the money committees? Ways and Means, which does tax policy, Energy and Commerce, which does healthcare and climate change and a host of other things, Financial Services, which obviously does banking and housing policy, and Appropriations, which is all the money and where it goes in the various parts of the government. Those committees all have less than 40% representation for the Progressive Caucus. The Progressive Caucus is around 40% of the entire Democratic caucus. So there was a deficiency there, and the co-chairs of the caucus, Mark Pocan and Pramila Jayapal, said, we want to up that. They were running into a problem, and the problem was that they couldn't find as many people as they needed to get onto these committees. The newer members they just kind of didn't know the importance of these committees. In the piece, there was a quote from Alex Lawson, who said to me, progressives come to Congress to change the world, and new Democrats and centrists come to Congress to get on the Ways and Means Committee.
Right.
Like they are very hyper-targeted.
It's like almost a cultural predisposition against these things.
Exactly. So progressives have 75% of the Judiciary Committee. That's like kind of where they hang out, like cliques at the tables and lunch. So, and then with existing members, the problem was that they have their own committees, and these exclusive committees are supposed to be things that you can't also serve on a different committee. on. So if you're
There's-
on Ways
there's
and
almost-
Means, you're not allowed necessarily to serve on another committee.
And there's a certain dynamic here that is similar to what we're seeing in the Senate regarding Joe Manchin's ascension to the
Energy Committee.
Energy Commission, sort of the ranking minority, or really the minority leader on that
Right.
committee, and that seems like it's going to happen. It's a separate issue, but the dynamic is similar insofar as you need people to come in and either give up seniority on another committee
Right.
and come into another committee where they wouldn't necessarily have the same.
They start at the ground floor,
Exactly.
and so all this seniority, and the Congress runs on seniority. You want a subcommittee chairmanship, you want a committee chairmanship, you got to put in the time.
And if I'm fighting for climate change, let's say,
I want to be on that energy committee, right? Yeah.
Well, but if I'm fighting for, I want to be on the energy committee. Well, I guess
maybe you want to be on the natural resources. If
Yeah.
you're into armed service, if you're into foreign
and
affairs.
Part of this is tied to what their constituency wants, or what they perceive their constituency wants, or what their brand is, and
Right.
what it's easier for them to brand themselves, or where they're getting funding and whatnot. And on some level, there's a certain amount of re-education that has to happen
Right.
for the House members and how they can re-educate their constituents and say, like, hey, this is important. It has value to you
Right.
that I'm on this committee.
Right. And so it was, there was some difficulty. I think it's sort of moving through. One thing that happened, so Barbara Lee lost this leadership race against Hakeem Jeffries.
Look at Michael. He's
the
fuming
Democratic
about it.
chair.
No, I know.
Pissed
It's
me off.
It's
It did.
annoying.
That was
So,
outrageous.
so Nancy Pelosi gives Barbara Lee a seat on what is called the Steering and Policy Committee. And she actually opened a third seat for a third co-chair. There were already two co-chairs. She made a third co-chair for Barbara Lee.
So she's taking power away from those other two existing ones.
and giving it to Barbara Lee.
Who are the other
What
two?
is this? Rosa DeLauro and Eric Swalwell, who are like loyalists to Pelosi. What does that committee do? It makes the committee assignments. It recommends the members and where they go. It builds the seating chart for what members go on what committees. So this is giving a progressive icon who all the progressives, or many of them at least, supported the ability to have a seat at the table to build out that committees. So that's important. The second thing is this AOC thing. So Ryan wrote about this. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was linked to a couple different committees, but now she's zeroed in on the Ways and Means Committee, the Tax Writing Committee. Now, there's this weird custom that someone from New York City has to be on the Ways and Means Committee. I don't know where it came from. I don't know why it is, but a member representing New York City must be on the Ways and Means Committee. Previously, the member from New York City that served on that committee was Joe Crowley. So AOC is making the argument, that's my spot. I beat him. I want that seat. There's another member who is angling for it, and that's Tom Suozzi, who is part of Queens and then Long Island.
Yeah. More Long Island.
Much more Long Island.
I'm just saying
like a
that.
piece of
Right,
Queens,
right,
but
right.
much more Long Island.
Queens is Long Island. Let's be honest.
Well,
Not
but
to alienate
it's part of the
members
city.
audience.
It's part of the city.
Yeah, but Queens
part
is
of the.
Long Island.
Yeah, I know, but
Sorry.
we want
I
to
get
get
it. The story
technicality
is
here.
cool,
On
blah,
a
blah,
technicality, he represents New York
Right.
City at some level. So he's also gunning for that seat. So it's the choices between AOC.
It's almost the
and
perfect
Suozzi.
sort of like metaphor microcosm for all of it, right?
Right.
In terms of the Democratic
I
Party.
think Hakeem Jeffries and Barbara Lee was up there too, as far as a microcosm.
Yeah,
conflict.
I think so. I mean, but that is, in that instance, it's, their fellow members voting for them,
Sure.
and some doing it under the auspices of misinformation that was put out there by Joe Crowley about
Yes.
the idea that
Tell
Barbara
that
Lee
wrote about that as
Well,
well.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
but
At the
you,
Intercept.
you wrote about that.
I did not write. Ryan wrote about that, but
Okay.
apparently go
Joe
ahead.
Crowley told a significant number of members of the caucus that Barbara Lee had contributed to AOC's campaign in the primary.
Well, I think he just said she contributed, and then people drew their own conclusion.
And they were like, well, we're not going to vote for leadership who's willing to use their leadership power to take out incumbents,
Right.
because everybody is self-interested.
And so the truth was
that she did it after she won the primary, like Steny Hoyer, like everybody else, like everybody else did.
Right.
God, it's like all the bad parts of Leninism and none of the good parts.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so
she did call Joe Crowley a white devil.
That was.
Yeah.
What does it say?
Oh wait, I said that.
Was that
My
on the
bad.
floor?
Yeah, she said this devil.
But that is
holding the seat from this brave young yellow woman.
And you get the sense that Pelosi was not happy with the way that vote turned out.
Well, I mean, it is interesting that she then felt the need to compensate, but that is also caucus management. Right?
Absolutely.
Because it was a close race.
But she wouldn't have done the same thing with Hakeem Jeffries.
I don't know. Maybe she would have. I don't know.
I just don't get that sense. Maybe she would have, but I think that like she knew there was the Hakeem Jeffries vote, I think, caused her more problems than it would have if Lee had won. And I think that's fair. That's my sense. But briefly, let's just talk about for a moment Joe Manchin. How effed up is that? What is wrong with Chuck Schumer?
Well, is it Chuck Schumer? I mean, so
it's the Baileys.
As we said, this whole thing runs on seniority. The Congress runs on seniority, and so the precipitating event is Cantwell, right? So Cantwell is taking over a different committee,
right?
I'm not sure which committee, but she wants to take over a different committee, and that opens up a spot on this energy committee. And there are 3 members who are on the committee who have seniority over Manchin, but they all already chair their own, or ranking member on their own committees. So Wyden already is ranking member on the Finance Committee, Bernie Sanders.
And you can only be ranking member on one committee.
That's correct. Bernie Sanders already on the Budget Committee, Stabenow already on Agriculture. So you tick them off, and the next one on the list is Manchin, right? And yes, environmentalists are apoplectic about this. At first, I think there was a lot of, at least on anti-Bernie Twitter, there was a lot of blame for Bernie.
Well, because because Politico wrote this, was it Politico or somebody wrote this piece that framed it as if it was Bernie Sanders' fault,
right?
As opposed to. But from my perspective, look, first off,
common sense leadership.
Here's why it's Schumer's problem.
Okay.
Because Schumer is the leader of the Senate.
Right.
At least the Democrats in the Senate. Leader. And the idea that you are going to kneecap the Democrats by, just from a rhetorical standpoint, on climate change. Like, you're going to put one of the biggest advocates for coal, short of Mitch McConnell, on this committee, who, incidentally, is not just, I don't even give him credit for being an earnest supporter of coal. I think he's just bought. And
I'm actually just super corrupt.
Yeah, exactly. I don't.
I mean,
it would be deep in my bones.
It's deep in my bones. Who I am.
This is just really just about.
I'll tell you what, Jenks.
Did
you ever see that interview with him and Cenk Uygur? I know I always mention it, but the question on Yemen is still the best piece of spin I've ever seen in my life. He's like, "Why were you one of 4 Democrats?" This was another Yemen vote a year ago. Like, why were you one of 4 Democrats that voted not to suspend arms sales to Saudi Arabia? And he's like, "You know what, Jenks? I think that we could do a lot more to monitor the civilian casualties over there if we're participating in it." I don't trust the Europeans to have the same kind of oversight. Now, I'll tell you what.
When you're riding shotgun, you can tell what you've run over.
No, exactly. He's like, I think a civilian casualty is more like killing innocent children is what it's more like. He literally. I was like, that guy's got.
So I'm looking. I mean, so you say, well, what can Schumer do about it?
Well, I'll tell you what Schumer.
Here's what he can do. So I'm looking at Manchin.
I like how David Dayen literally has to
I'm looking at Manchin's.
I have the actual list of literally what he could do.
I'm looking at Manchin's committee assignments.
Right.
So Manchin sits on appropriations. You're not going to be able to kick out someone in appropriations and give him that. He's on intelligence. And he's on Veterans Affairs. So I'm not sure exactly at the moment who is the ranking member on Veterans Affairs. It used to be Sanders. I don't know who it is now. But you could work a compromise and say, tell you what, Joe,
you get Veterans
You've
Affairs.
got tons of veterans in West Virginia.
Yep.
We will give you the ranking membership of the Veterans Affairs Committee. It's a high-profile assignment, a lot of bipartisanship. That'll help you back home, and we'll give somebody else the Energy Committee. That's what a minority leader would do.
Exactly. That
I'll
is
tell
my
you what,
point.
Chuck. That's a real good Jew negotiating tactic. But I see a lot of campaign
Is this slander against
contributions.
me right now?
Slander against you? No, I think
No, but this is my point.
But
This
he
is-
doesn't. He's not going to give up.
No,
energy.
Chuck, no,
There's
but-
way too much money to raise.
Well,
on
look,
energy.
there's plenty of money for him to raise there. But the thing is that that Schumer can also, like, he can say, here's the carrot, and I have a stick, because we don't need you, Joe. We're in the minority now by 4. Like, you're deserting us. No longer has the power that it did, 6 months ago.
Well, to be
then he
fair,
could go
he's got
negotiate with the
to
Republicans.
think about
No.
when there's a 50-50 split and Vice President O'Rourke or whoever is casting the deciding vote in 2 years. I mean, it's not that easy to be the leader of the Senate caucus, but there is a way. You just give them Veterans Affairs.
Yes. Or you go to someone else, some other, senator, and say, like, look, if you want to be in the minor, if you want to be in the majority, we're going to have to do things that are going to help the brand. It is going to be very problematic to go out there, particularly with a lot of young people who are going to, the next presidential nominee, whoever it is going to be out there talking about the urgency of climate change. And we're going to look to the Senate and we're going to have a guy who literally is
a coal,
coal shoveling
depository.
coal money.
And not to jump on Sanders, but he's the natural guy who you would say, give it up for the team.
Unless
take the budget
you're
committee
Sanders
away.
and you're thinking there's a 50-50 chance
I'm not going to be here. But
I'm not going to be
But
here.
if you're running on, I don't think it's going to be majorly problematic for him in any way. But the guy this week did a 2-hour streaming thing on the Green New Deal. If there's any way in which he can be someone who say, I'm going to step up and I'm going to take over this committee because I'm going to run on climate change in 2020.
He doesn't know that he's going to run yet. That's the problem.
And you know what? And also what's happening.
He doesn't know that he's going to run.
I think he's almost definitely going to run, but I think this is a coordinated attack.
Is it?
David Dayen is
did.
with other pro-Warren.
Well, I was going to get to that.
Yeah.
I was going to get to that.
There's
but
no
wait a
doubt
second.
what's going on.
I think the fact that he won't take this is indicative that he doesn't know yet that he's going to run. He may end up running. He may end up not. But I don't think he knows right now. Because if he did,
if you had to bet money, what would you go with though?
If I had to bet money at this point, I would think now, really, in the wake of what happened with Elizabeth Warren.
We're talking DNA gate.
Yeah, okay. that I think from a political standpoint, the takeaway from that was like, she's not staffed properly. Her political team is not up to par. And I think from Sanders' perspective, it's like, if he thought that she could win, I think he would step down.
I wanted to sit this one out, but
he would sit it out. But
so.
I think honestly, and so I don't think he knows enough, because I think if he did know, then he would do that maybe and get by Schumer another 2 years.
I don't know that he would do it if he did know necessarily, because I don't know that Bernie thinks that way.
In terms of like
I think he likes being on. First of all, think he likes being ranking member of the Budget Committee, even though it's not that important a committee in the grand scheme of things. But he gets to talk about every part of the budget, which means he gets to talk about all of his domestic policy at once. So that's number one. And I just think he's not weedy like that. This is a weird issue, right?
Right.
About seniority and things like that, and it's just sort of popped up. So maybe he will come around and do that. But I ultimately think Schumer is the one who needs to forge the compromise here.
Do you know who the Baileys are?
Yes,
Are you familiar with
the Baileys would compromise.
What
on
would the
this
Baileys
issue.
do, Dave?
Right.
We got to get to the Baileys and tell them to get Schumer off his ass.
If you don't get to the Baileys, it's not going to happen.
And you are...
The Baileys like clean air.
I meant to ask
Theoretically, I don't know. I haven't talked to them. That's a special connect.
Mrs. Bailey's a little bit on the fence.
I think Mrs. Bailey...
Mrs. Bailey likes compromise.
I did literally read several years ago because I wanted to do more Bailey's background research to make fun of Chuck Schumer. And he's at a Chinese restaurant. And one of the things he's like, the Baileys don't want small cars. The Baileys like SUVs. So that wasn't a positive.
Don't the Baileys own an entire Irish cream industry?
No. They're middle class Massapequa Baileys. They don't. They're
heirs to the Irish.
They don't hate black people, but
I want to prove that my I reach out to the
we used to call them
Irish
those
Catholics.
people. Anyways, let's negotiate,
No,
Mr. President. You want any more judges confirmed?
The Irish and the Jews were always good friends down on the.
He's off.
I meant to ask you at the beginning of today's episode because I feel obligated to now. Are you part of this cabal trying to push Beto O'Rourke out of contention in the primary?
No comment. No. No, not at all.
Whoa.
Where's the Perry Mason music? When
Here
you
we
need
go.
It?
What is the cabal?
Oh, it's
I actually
sort of
That's exactly what the
you
cabal
say.
said.
I was on a plane. Part of the
That
cabal.
is what I would say, right?
Right. Cabal?
I was on a plane yesterday.
What does
so
cabal
I'm
mean?
not, I'm not
I
sure.
see. Plausible deniability.
Right.
I was on a plane.
Don't launch the first attack until I'm in the air.
I was in a plane.
We rally at dawn.
Apparently, Elizabeth Brunig wrote a piece that that highlighted that Beto O'Rourke had, has taken some not great votes, but also was involved in working on a pretty predatory real estate business, I think, in Texas. And
it was also like, but I have to say, I mean, I like, it was a great piece, but it was also like the piece that someone like me would echo in the sense that I like Beto O'Rourke. I hope he runs for Senate in Texas. I don't hate the guy. It's just, it's ludicrous that people are talking about him as a contender. And if you're on the left, you have serious policy disagreements with him. I would add one addendum, and I know we've made this point before. Any conversation that's talking about a candidate that lost as a potential presidential candidate, why is Stacey Abrams not at the top of this list? In fact, I would suggest, I mean, we've talked about the pool of voters that were disenfranchised could have made up the margin she lost by. I feel comfortable calling it a stolen race. She did an incredibly impressive job. And I think especially because the people who are sort of the biggest sort of promoters of this Beto thing are the pseudo-woke performative people that are always going to go on Bernie off of like fake identity issues. It's very bizarre that they aren't embracing Stacey Abrams, who's an incredibly impressive person who should be in, I would say, VP, frankly.
I mean, I wonder if, if it's a function of Stacey Abrams not necessarily. I mean, look, people are talking about Beto O'Rourke about this way because they're being encouraged to. Right. I mean, it's not like he's sitting there like, it never even occurred to me. No, when people start talking about him as a potential candidate, it's because during the course of his campaign, a couple of people said, you're very charismatic. And he raised $30 million,
no doubt,
which is a tremendous sum for a somewhat quixotic campaign, theoretically. And he's promoting it. I don't know that Stacey Abrams is out there.
I think some of it is organic, though. I do. I don't think it's all. I think, especially in social media, when people sort of pontificate about these things, I think some of it is just.
Well, now wait. Let me ask a couple things here. And I just can't wait for the left to eat itself throughout this entire primary.
Right.
I'm really excited for where this goes, but. It's no accident that Deval Patrick decided not to run this week.
Because of the Zach Carter piece?
No, it has nothing to do with the Zach Carter piece. It has everything to do with the Obama world saying, you're out.
We're going to clear the field.
We're going for Beto. No, I mean, not clear the field, but we're
clear
going
the lane.
for Beto. We're backing Beto.
Right, okay.
We're not backing you. And I think that played a major role because, as you recall, there was a lot of talk about Obama world backing
Deval Patrick. Yes.
And suddenly he decides, I'm not running this week. It was pretty early.
Well, let me put it this way. My sense would be that the message that they got from the Obama world and that piece that came out, the timing is not coincidental.
The piece was part of it, I think.
Well, no, but wait a second. You're missing my point.
No, and also there's real issues in terms of
yes, that's true.
His
but
family.
But often the way these things work, okay, is different parts of that world have different jobs to do.
Right.
One comes in and says, "Look, this
You're
is
not
probably."
saying Zach Carter is part of Obama.
No,
yes,
but
he's part
I'm
of
not saying
Obama.
that Zach Carter's.
Nor is he affected by anyone who would be part of Obama. We're not saying, hey, you better write this piece.
No, but you write the piece because you have the information, and the information starts flowing, and it starts getting out there, and
I think the timing was interesting.
I
think Zach writes what Zach wants to write.
No, of course, but you know how this works with spokespeople and communications people. They say, who's going to be good to write this piece? And they look at
I just don't feel like anyone who would be in that position that Zach Carter would be the person they would go to.
I don't know that was, I don't know.
Do we have Zach on the phone?
I don't know.
I'll ask him. Do you also know about the very sad, real thing when he was first governor of Massachusetts, how he almost resigned because of his wife having some very serious anxiety and depression issues?
No, I didn't.
They've written and spoken about it publicly. So I actually also think his sense of the toll that this could take on my family, I know that's a talking
point. He made a glancing
I don't think that's total BS in his case.
No, I think there's all these factors. Genuine. I think it's all these factors. All right, but let's get back to a moment for Beto, because look, I know you're on the fence here, but let me just bring in Chris Matthews to tell you what you need to do.
Matthews.
Here is Chris Matthews.
Right, here we go.
This is it really is sort of
You're David Dayen. You're part of the cabal.
We're going to look back on this in 16 months from now, like with fond.
Is the thrill is back?
Remember the Beto Wars? Remember the Beto Wars of late 2018? Here we go.
And we, the Democratic Party, have not given them an alternative.
Let's talk about presidential politics, because I'm already thinking about 2020. I know you all are, too. CNBC's reporting that Democratic Congressman Beto O'Rourke of Texas' team has been fielding calls from senior operatives who worked on President Barack Obama's campaign in the pivotal states of Iowa and New Hampshire. As speculation continues about a potential presidential run by Beto in 2020, one columnist at the Washington Post is already questioning whether the Democratic rising star, Beto O'Rourke, is far enough left for the party. Elizabeth Brunig writes, we still have time to pick a politician with a bold, clear, distinctively progressive agenda and an articulate vision beyond something better than this, the literal translation of hope change campaigning. Beto's a lot like Obama, true. It's perhaps time for left-leaning Democrats to realize that may not be a good thing. Peter, I'm amazed by this. Here's a guy that has electoral power. People like him. He's got charisma like Obama. And he had somebody on the left saying he's not left enough.
Well,
explain that.
There's an amazing, wonderful blue-collar philosopher who once said, naivete in children is often charming. In adults, it's stupidity. That's political stupidity. For that person to write about antipathy towards Wall Street, oil and gas, welfare reform, those are all major issues that we need a president to deal with, not to simply scorn them and discard them. And second, I think Beto's in an incredible position, not necessarily about the presidency, but he's captured energy. And one of the failings of the Obama campaign in 2008 was that after we won, we never had a call to service. And I think Beto and his team are figuring out where do you take all that energy.
Get people in the act. Let me go to Ashley on this.
I don't know who that was.
If the Democratic Party,
I don't know who that was, but I have a feeling it doesn't feel like he's got his fingers on the pulse.
They just found some accountant in New Jersey. They're like, hey, you want to be an asshole on Chris Matthews' show?
By the way, so Trump beat Clinton in Texas by 9 points. Beto comes within, what was it, 2, 3?
3.
Trump lost by 2 points nationally. Democrats won in 2018 by 8 points.
Right.
It's the same swing. It's the same spread.
There's
It's the
no,
exact
in other words,
same spread.
He did not outperform.
No, he performed exactly as well as everyone
everybody
else.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, but he's so inspiring, not like that boring Obama guy.
Well, you know what I noticed about those posters? Do you see it?
What?
That's the exact, those Beto posters are identical to Obama's posters in 2004.
The Viva Beto?
No.
In 04.
Yes, the Senate poster, because I have one of those from 2004. And
It's up in your room, above your bed.
It is above my bed. I look at it every night.
On the ceiling?
Change.
It's still possible if I move the O over here and I take out this part of the B, it's Beto. It's very similar, like just that big lettering up there at the top of the sign. But all right. Well, is there more sound here? Yeah. Let's keep playing it. I don't know who this guy is. It's like Mort Kondracki.
Somebody call in or write in.
Yeah.
They just took him off like the LAR or something.
In the act, let me go to Ashley on this. It seems to me that if the Democratic Party sets as a standard, you must be Bernie. In other words, a avowed socialist. I'm not knocking it, but if that's the political goal line you're setting up, if this person isn't for so-called Medicare for everybody all life, if they're not for free tuition payback, if they're not for all these social programs, if they're not for a big role for the government and the economy, then they're not Democrats. If that's the standard, you're going to knock out a lot of candidates.
Well, let's look at this, though. The DNC...
Now, pause it. Hold on. Let me just say this. I think that Elizabeth Brunig... sitting atop of where she sits, choosing who gets to be Democrats is wrong. I don't know who gave her this power, but I mean, should anybody have that power?
Probably not.
I don't even think that she all right.
If that's the standard, you're going to knock out a lot of candidates.
Well, let's look at this, though. The DNC itself was against Bernie Sanders, and they set parameters to make sure that he would not get enough support and not have the support he needed. And let's go back to superdelegates and all of that. So I do think the establishment in the Democratic Party will not allow someone too progressive to get back in.
Well, I don't know. That's what about the voters?
So now here's
Let's
the
talk about
interesting
winning
piece.
a game.
So you've got to get.
How do you beat Trump?
You've got to get to the suburban, middle-class, blue-collar voters. And they need to start thinking about that Obama-Trump flip that happened in 2016.
Blue-collar voters?
Middle-class blue-collar voters.
Wait, who are those guys?
The Westchester County folks who just go over to the car factory out in Westchester County.
In Briarcliff Manor. They make $500,000 a year and they drive upstate to work in Rochester.
What? Who are the suburban middle class blue collar workers?
It's like as he grabbed his macchiato.
There are
on
6
his
of
way
them,
to his
and
car
they're highly influential.
We have them all here on our list, and so we know that
they're in this panel right now. This blue
I
ribbon
know
panel.
Who it is. It's the Baileys.
Yeah.
All right, let's continue on.
Middle class blue collar.
You've got to
How do you beat Trump?
You've got to get to the suburban, middle-class, blue-collar voters, and they need to start thinking about that Obama-Trump flip that happened in 2016, that again flipped in 2018. If you do not focus on that, which they're moderate swing voters,
Your ears to
I'm not going to vote for a progressive.
I am completely.
I would vote for a Joe Biden, not a Beto
Okay,
O'Rourke.
how do you get the people in the industrial states who flip from Trump to the Democratic candidates for senator and governor in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, the whole?
I know. I totally agree. It's like she's only talking about the primary, which is one thing, but let's move on to the general election.
You know what they used to say back in the 60s?
What's that?
NBC, November doesn't count. The hard left would say, as long as we win the primaries, it doesn't matter. George McGovern. But that mentality's out there, Peter. It's out there now. I just saw in the paper today.
Wow. We should definitely still be afraid of
Beto O'Rourke
McGovern-Nixon
is too much like
election in 72.
Obama. That's a problem.
At least 100,000 people are still alive.
Yeah. Wait. Okay. Yeah. It is but this is
It's gonna be McGovern,
right. This is generational. I mean, this is what has been problematic with the Democrats for a long time, is that the baby boomers still hold, because of the size of their generation, still hold too much sway over essentially the convention, the common wisdom, the conventional wisdom. And the idea that you can draw any parallels now between George McGovern and anybody in like there's no, it is.
Well, I mean, to draw a parallel with George McGovern, you have to find a candidate who is broadly seen on the anti-war left, who was hated by unions.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Like, who is that parallel today?
With reason, too, right? He was the one who cut the unions' power out from under them and picking who...
well, I mean, it was a little bit more complicated. Unions were strongly pro-war at that point. George Meany himself was
a little bit of an overstatement.
He was so pro-labor. He tried so hard to get the unions on his side, and they just totally snubbed him.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that he was anti. It's the unions were
where he
strongly
went
against him.
bad was his reaction to it led him to later in his career do like anti-card check propaganda, which is really
well, but it's an interesting comparison, right? Because the things that sank McGovern back then were very, very different from the things that the centrists are saying would sink Bernie right now.
Right.
A lot of things that sunk McGovern with the socially conservative unions were things that every Democrat supports now, things known as identity politics, right? Yeah. Minority rights, gay marriage, drug laws, anti-war, etc. Whereas, and their economic policies were actually very much in line with his. And now it's the economic policies.
Amnesty, acid, abortion.
Yeah. Now it's
Bernie
the economic
2020.
policies that they're saying are too left. So it's like really a bad comparison.
As long as Bernie doesn't pick a vice presidential nominee who was treated for clinical depression, I think he'll be fine.
Right. Now we should also say that that I think part of the animosity came from the commission that McGovern co-chaired that changed the way that our primaries ran. I mean, they actually created primaries as opposed to a back room where unions had a tremendous amount of power in basically picking who the nominee was.
That's true.
But without,
I'm totally bummed. I really thought that Chris Matthews was going to develop a crush on AOC and become a Democratic socialist.
She's got it.
I totally lost it.
Well,
I thought he was just going to be like, I mean,
This is the problem with oligarchs.
But what's fascinating to me? Well, I guess it's not that fascinating to me. I mean, the idea that
that's a good setup.
Say it's fascinating.
Aren't we?
Is it or isn't it?
Well, I mean, I should know better at this point. Like, it should be completely boring to me.
Oh, you actually would expect better than that?
No,
from these people?
it's just
okay.
I don't believe the idea that there are folks who are willing to already sort of like who think they're playing this poorly is my point. Is the forces that want a Beto are playing this poorly because they are polarizing too early. It just seems to me
too early.
It is way too early to sort of like complain about the idea that there are people who are pointing to Beto's record and saying, "Hey, this is problematic." What you should be doing is you push back on his record. You should be building him instead of.
I'll help him. There's one vote that I've seen put out there that O'Rourke voted, some financial deregulation vote. That bill never became law. That the vote that is being pointed to is something that was just one of the many deregulatory measures the House passed that never got through the Senate. The one that did, the deregulatory bank bill, the one big bipartisan bank deregulation bill this year, Beto voted against it. So just do that instead of presuming a cabal.
They're scared. They're scared, man.
I think actually it's funny. It's surprising to me too, because I think there's actually a lot of people like me who obviously will support Bernie over Beto because we're left. But like, I have no particular antipathy or hostility to him at all. And they're fast tracking.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, no,
I'm talking
totally
completely
right.
from a strategic
Totally
standpoint.
Right.
This is not the time where you set this up.
Totally.
You set up this because it's not going to be helpful.
Totally.
It's not. It certainly wasn't helpful during the 2016 primaries, and those forces are not as well situated as they were then. Mm-hmm. And so it's a big mistake.
Although Beto's a better candidate than
it's
Hillary.
a big mistake.
Yes, I dislike
but my
Beto.
point is, point is, you don't want to make this about the so-called Bernie Bros
No,
versus Beto. They're doing it more than
100%.
others are.
I mean, Elizabeth Bruning said already. She said we're already at that time where I forget how she. I mean, there's a couple of other things, but she's like, we're already at that time where I'm a white male magically.
Right.
Like she's like, we're not even like in the friggin' election cycle yet, and all this garbage.
My biggest
already.
problem was with Maloney. And Beto sort of coming in, I think he endorsed Maloney in the New York AG race, if I remember correctly.
Oh, Sean Patrick Maloney.
Yes.
Oh, that's a trash move.
And that makes me nervous.
Yeah.
As to what's like something's like all that low key stuff.
What makes me nervous is that it's still 2018 on the calendar, and we're already at each other's throats.
What makes me nervous is
but that's my point. It's like I think like they're escalating. I mean, I think like Neera Tanden escalated this in a useless, silly way. Do we put up?
That's what she does.
Put it back up. Put it back up. I mean, well, I understand, but somebody should. There should be somebody
the truth
in that world
is
who
that
says
everyone's
like, hey,
still fighting the 2016 primary.
But I felt like that stuff had sort of had.
Nope. Have you been on
Everyone's
Twitter lately?
Still fighting
well,
and Neera Tanden is on the front lines of the 2016.
Yeah, she needs
war.
to log.
The war of 2016
Yeah, she should get offline.
Maybe
it's like when Andrew Jackson in 1814 was still fighting that battle of the War of 1812. Like she's still fighting the War of 2016.
I know it.
She's
She
like
always will
she's
be.
like one of the people in the hills in Japan that hasn't heard that World War II is
World War
over.
II, yeah.
Except
In
they still- except she still
1975, they find the
Right.
guy who's in a cave.
Yeah, except that guy would still like be running a division
Positions,
of the
yeah,
Japanese
in a position of
military.
power.
That's the problem.
Well, maybe
running propaganda
Yeah,
operations.
exactly. Right.
If I may, maybe it's time for the hard left to flex its muscles a little bit and remind the people in the political class that, and in the ruling class, that the Elizabeth Bruning option, the Bernie option, that is a nice option. People are angry, and if we don't get what we want in the electoral sphere, or even if we do, we're gonna have some widespread unrest outside of it.
Well, yeah, I don't think that's going to happen on Twitter. I don't think that's a place for that to.
No, certainly not. But, maybe have a wildcat strike or two. Put the fear of God in them. Only the left is so weak that that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I just, it's just what we're talking about here has nothing to do with people who would do a wildcat strike. It has only to do with like what the political class is doing. I mean, this is just
nothing to do with people's lives.
Yes,
I would
nothing.
argue.
Yeah, exactly.
And
we just talked about it. We just talked about this bank that was, doing bad credit reporting on thousands of people, and what does this have to do with
Well, no, they still view
real policy. I mean, I just have to say, like, I would say, like, and I'm pro Bernie, whatever, but isn't it really clear that, I mean, if specifically on the issues you're talking about, I mean, I think Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are definitely the only candidates that I would absolutely trust on that.
I think
type
Sherrod
of issue.
Brown is pretty good
Sherrod
on
Brown,
stuff
if he
like
runs.
that. And
Sherrod Brown, but those three.
What I'm saying
Merkley,
is-
I think it's pretty
He's
good.
not
on,
running. I'm
Like-
talking about. a
Is he
candidate.
not?
I have not
still-
heard he's running. That would be interesting.
They're still trying to
Merkley
portray.
has talked about running. We have 34, to my count, Democrats that have talked about running in a serious way.
Jesus Christ.
They're still trying to
34.
portray Bernie as this like
exhausting.
hard left socialist, this extremist, and like the furthest left option that exists. When in fact he is a very moderate compromiser, as far as I'm concerned.
I'll tell you what. We should.
But
have
I think
He's not-
Chris
But I think you have to
Matthews top maple
concede
syrup.
that within the context of American politics, Bernie Sanders is to the left of any candidate who people think actually has a chance of winning the nomination.
Yeah, sure.
I
But
mean-
the things he's proposing are not actually socialism. They're just common sense social democratic policies that every other country in the developed world has.
I'll
and
say one thing.
the
I think
more
that's-
they can make him look crazy, the more they drag
I
that
feel
window of
like that
possibility
they look
back
crazy
over to the
by
right.
saying he looks crazy.
Yeah, I feel
now.
like that
It
window
all
has been
backfires.
shut.
Because the play of the smart ones, and this is the difference between Obama and Clinton people. It's really subtle. Obama people get, oh, we should pretend to be closer to that.
Right.
The Clinton people are
We're
like,
listening.
that's crazy, and he's a white supremacist.
Yeah,
'cause
Obama's
they're
like,
nuts.
we're listening.
Yeah, the Obama people are like, oh, that's a really good point.
Right.
We're for like universal Medicare
Well, this is what I find. Okay,
yeah.
so this is what I find so strange about what's going on now, and maybe it's just rogue, sort of Clintonites who are just mad about Bernie and mad about certain people.
Yes, they're.
But the point that you're making is that the Obama people are going to dress Beto up
100%.
as if he's like, I'm like practically a younger Bernie.
They're going to send him to the Wildcat strike on his skateboard.
Right, exactly. And
how do you do, fellow leftists?
Absolutely.
And I think to the extent that Neera Tanden had a point about people being worried, I think there is a worry on the left that people are going to project onto Beto positions and a philosophy that he doesn't necessarily have.
I'm looking forward to O'Rourke getting his band together for a remake of Fight Song.
Oh my God! Don't even speak that into existence.
But do people remember at the beginning of this campaign, at the beginning of his senatorial campaign, you heard a lot of like, look, he's not as progressive as he appears.
You did hear that originally.
And
he's a Texas congressman.
He's from Texas, and there is a lot of sense on the left that a lot of people projected stuff onto Obama that was not there. That people did not realize that he was not an ideologue.
Boy, we haven't fallen into that trap again.
Well, I mean, what do you mean?
I mean, I feel like what you're saying, that he's sort of a blank slate.
Yeah, and
project
people
all
projecting.
your wishes and desires.
And what's happening now is I think you're getting people to say like, look, don't project.
Right.
And
right.
And
it's because that's
people
my
are pissed.
Yeah, I don't hate Beto, but that's just my like. I actually kind of like him, but I just want to be very clear that this guy is not. If you're interested in a progressive candidate, this is not your pick.
If he becomes the eventual nominee, I want his liabilities to be known and articulated as being on the left.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what does it say about the Democratic Party that they even need to have a progressive caucus in the first place? Like, isn't the party supposed to be progressive?
It's a coalition party.
I mean, it's a big party. I mean, it's. I mean, I don't know what else.
I would say that, in thinking about the role of the left in this next cycle, it might be wiser, rather than staking out a position of supporting one candidate above all else, might be wiser to support certain issues and demand that every candidate move toward them.
Totally. Here comes Brookings Institutions.
That would certainly put us in a better position after the election, should a Democrat be elected, to continue that forward.
Absolutely.
That's what the Bernie people are doing, but people keep accusing us of having
what
this
the Green
cult
New
of
Deal's all about.
personality.
That's what the Green New Deal's all about.
But the point is, I mean, if you analyze that statement, the Bernie people are doing this.
The people who support Bernie support him not because of who he is, but because of the policies
my point
that
is,
he
like,
represents.
look at what AOC is doing on the Green New Deal. She has said, we need this particular committee because we have this crisis out there and we need to build legislation for it. And we need to go around to every member of Congress now, no matter who they are or who supported them, whatever, and said, are you going to support this Green New Deal Commission? And she's got like 20 of them already in the space, before she's a congressman, in the space of a week or two, to support it. And that seems to be, to me, to be the organizing principle.
But that's different than picking
left.
your presidential candidate.
No, it isn't. It's saying,
but literally,
we have 10 candidates here. Are you going to support? This is what was done on healthcare and without as much participation on the left, and so we got the healthcare we got. It was what was done on you build consensus and you say that this is a threshold issue.
But there are the only two roadblocks to that are, I mean, first of all, I think, of course, generically and generally that's true. And then it's like, okay.
I am generic.
No, I mean, it's true. It's, of course, you're right. But I think that, like, okay, so the thing that I keep hitting with Bernie is like no one is near him on those consensus issues on foreign policy. That matters to me. What your position on Brazil is, what your position on Yemen or the Iran deal is, or Israel. It matters to me. I don't think so. That's number one. He's still far ahead of the rest of them. And then number two, I think you have to decide at some point, like, do you really trust somebody's, of those relative choices, I trust Bernie just even in terms of who he'll appoint to oversee Wall Street as an example, or Warren. I trust her too, far more than I do trust Cory Booker as an example.
By the way, what Warren did in 2016 was create this idea of personnel as policy,
right?
And she pinned down.
That's great.
Clinton on who she was going to appoint.
That's great.
And tried to disqualify certain people who were in Clinton's orbit for appointments. So, I mean, there are ways to go about this that aren't just personality driven.
But I didn't say anything about personality.
But the idea is that instead of what David is suggesting is instead of starting with the person and assessing their issues, you come up with an issue set and you push those issues and you let people fall in line, and then you start to assess, okay, have they adopted this position? Do I trust them? Now, you're also talking like we may have 9 months, 12 months, 14 months to make these people say it over and over and over in public in such a way that's like, it doesn't matter if you trust them or not. Like some obviously are within a certain zone, but the idea being that what the Neratandans are doing now a mistake is they are forcing people to pick candidates much earlier than they should be.
Yeah, they're short-circuiting that whole process.
They're short-circuiting that whole process.
Look, I can assure
on the left,
you that
can happen on that
Bernie
process
Sanders
too.
comes out and he goes, I want more settlements in the West Bank, and Lula should be in jail and privatize Social Security, I will not continue to support Bernie Sanders. I mean, I think that, like, of course, I actually think a lot of people, especially, that was the sort of distinguishing marker of Bernie's campaign, was actually people being more policy oriented.
Yeah.
And I understand that I get that there's personality cults around everybody. I get it. But that's, I mean, first of all, that applies just as easily to Hillary Clinton or Beto. But if you're really seriously talking about policy, there's major differences here. And there is also a background of credibility that people have and other people don't have. I mean, this is not that really, it seems pretty obvious.
Yeah, and it's not just about their platform in the moment, right? Like, we've heard everything before. We've heard so much progressive talk from so many people, from, Bill Clinton to Obama. Like, I want to see what they've done in the past. And Bernie has been bashing away at this stuff for decades. Like, we know where he stands. Versus, if like a Hillary type candidate came out and said, oh yeah, Medicare for all is a great idea, and then you look at what they've done in the past, like, people might not trust them.
I mean, it's true. I mean, but that said, people definitely changed based upon the situation. I mean, I think Bernie is probably softer on guns than he was 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, well,
they're really.
No, I mean, look. I mean, I know it's not your issue, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a dynamic.
Yeah, they're foreclosing on the availability to make Beto a better candidate over all this, right? By short-circuiting all this immediately, because it's not like Matthews' complaint wasn't that people are cultists about Bernie. It was that they're doing purity tests around issues like Medicare for everybody, stuff, right?
Exactly.
Right. Well,
and so he's stopping this process, and that's what all these people are doing.
Right. I mean, that's why you got to focus on the issue and not make it associated with personnel at this point.
But there is going to be a certain point when you're like, okay,
yes, I know. But in 2018, the idea is
Bernie
not
Sanders.
The idea is not
throughout 2019.
Yeah, the idea in 2018, 2019 is not to start to apply the test. It is to create the test.
Sure.
And then, if the test is created, then people are in a position to fail it or succeed in that extent.
Or to get pulled in directions.
Of course.
Let's talk about this for a moment, because this is a great interview, Chris Hayes.
You're going like 5 minutes.
Okay, good. This will be the last thing we'll have you for. Let's. We mentioned North Carolina. even Chris Kobach apparently now is recognizing there could be something wrong with the election in North Carolina.
What are Democrats trying to steal?
9th district. Yeah.
It's like
and
came. That's
so
the problem.
Chris Hayes had on his program, I guess it was last night, the North Carolina Republican executive director. This is Dallas Woodhouse. Is he Leighton Woodhouse's brother or something like that? Or no, different guy.
I doubt it.
Who's that?
Well, there is like two brothers, but
no, that's Brad Woodhouse.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Who are the Woodhouses?
So, like a brother team that
It's
are on different
heartwarming.
sides. Yeah,
They're on
sort of
opposite
like
sides. Political divide.
Maitland,
Gotcha.
Carvel type
Okay.
of situation.
Got it.
All right. Well, anyway, so Chris Hayes had on last night the North Carolina Republican executive director, and remember the Republican Party in North Carolina has basically, I don't know what the numbers are, 100,000 some odd, have kept people off the voting rolls, have depressed voter turnout, all ostensibly based upon voter fraud. And this is the only real case that they've ever found. And this is not voter fraud, it is electoral fraud. Here is Hayes.
You want to cite something you said in the days after the election where you said in a phone call, we are trying to keep Democrats from stealing the congressional race from Mark Harris. Now, that's obviously an incredibly loaded charge that you made. Do you want to apologize for that or take that back?
Or just change the name?
Well, no, because I made that call to donors of the North Carolina Republican Party, which you're not one of, I feel sure. But if you'd like to be, we're at 1506 Hillsborough Street in Raleigh, North Carolina. No, but I think this.
But you were wrong, right? I mean, your position was this is a sort of made-up scandal, and the Democrats are out to try to steal this out from under our noses. We won 905 votes. They're refusing to concede. That proved to be wrong, right? I mean, you get out over your skis. There was actual, apparently criminal activity.
Okay. What I would say is there are a lot of different things going on here. The ground is shifting under our feet. I don't think you can excuse the Democrats on the State Board of Elections that all of a sudden dropped this on our lap after no election protest was filed, after Mr. McCready conceded the election, after no recount was called for, and after all of the local boards of elections certified the race. We have never seen that happen.
Wait a second, though. Wait a second.
And sir, if I can just finish this one point, I apologize.
will let you.
And at the same time, the state is engaged in a very difficult negotiation and fight over the control of the Board of Elections.
That I know.
And so the Board of Elections that's walking out the door simply comes out and says they're not going to certify, and at that time really don't say why.
Okay.
I mean, of course we're going to be suspicious of that.
That's a process complaint. Let's put that to the...
Yeah, imagine this guy going like, you didn't find that the money was missing from the bank until they had gotten away in the got-away car and they'd already crossed the bridge and paid their toll, and then all of a sudden they got to come back?
It's called Lilly Ledbetter. Right? I mean, that's that is exactly what the court said in the Lilly Ledbetter case. Lilly Ledbetter was a woman who was discriminated against on pay for 20 years.
Yep.
And she found out about it years later and said, I want my back pay. I was doing the same job with this other guy, and he was making all this more money than me. And the court said, well, you didn't find out about it in time, so we're not going to do anything. And then Congress had to change the law.
Yeah.
So timeliness is a thing, but I don't know that it's a thing in this context when there's obviously fraud. And when the Board of Elections did not certify the race.
That's the point, right? The certification is supposed to be like, we have cleared the deck of all the potential like rampant fraud that could have existed. And, we found some before the certification. Like, I mean, it's one thing to say like, okay, you serve your 2 years and then, 3 years from now, they go, hey, wait a second. There was some... Or even when they're a sitting congressperson.
Yeah, I think that the statute of limitations has not run out if
when they haven't
the race has not been certified at all.
That's the whole point of the certification.
Right.
But his arguments were sort of, well, I was lying to my donors, not everybody.
I know, I like that. Like,
and I almost got
just
away
doing
with
my
it.
job.
Yeah.
Man, what do you want? You want to give me some money? And
I'm a propagandist.
That's right. Look, I'm a paid hack.
You hit me for
cut
this.
a check. I won't lie on your show.
Right. I mean, what do you... Bear shits in the woods. I don't know what to tell you.
That's how you talk to donors. I don't know what you want from me.
People buy Alex Jones pills, Chris. What the hell you think?
Well, David Dayen, it has been a real honor and pleasure to have you in studio.
Always to be good in the Seder Auditorium.
There we go.
Here.
Yes, in the massive.
Yes.
Yeah, you can see that we actually did put some.
I have some fans
in the
up
rafters.
in the third balcony.
But David, thank you much for coming on. I hope most everyone, I think, who listens to this program has purchased your book, Chain of Title.
Very good.
And
good to hear.
They can find you. Where do you like to send people? To your Tumblr or?
Sure. So daviddayen.tumblr.
And your tiny letter? You want to tell people about your tiny letter?
tinyletter.com/David Dayen is my bi-weekly, twice a week newsletter. That
only twice a week.
Usually twice a week.
Okay.
That includes links to everything I write about.
You know,
and
there's
a little bit more
theory going around
Yes,
on this program that you don't actually exist. That
well, I've disproven that.
Well, you're just the guy they send in.
You could still have a team in India.
They send you in.
Are you saying I'm a crisis actor?
I mean, look, I've noticed you've had
Milo.
I've noticed you've had a headset on the whole time you've been here.
That's true.
You could be just somebody's like
I'm a replicant. Is what you're saying?
I'm saying there could be a guy in a van down in the street, listening to the show, feeding you information as part of the team.
Talk about CFPB.
They're all typing away.
There's
on the
like
computer.
this Cyrano de Bergerac situation.
He's the suave, personable, handsome face of a shady collective.
Exactly. Like there's the Soros-funded traveling van out there with 14 reporters, the communications van, and you're just the guy they send out to actually front it.
We're gonna see David in
a fair cop.
We're gonna see him in an IBM Watson commercial or something like that.
They found Dane at some
Deep
bar.
Blue.
Yeah.
It's like, you know what postal banking is? Nah. You're going to learn it.
Yeah, now that I'm off the show, I can do it my normal accent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This is like the Bourne identity. All right, David Dayen, thank you so much. All right, folks, we're going to take a break, head into the fun half. A reminder, it is your support that makes this show possible. You become a member of this program by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. It is your membership that keeps this show humming along. Folks, I've got some good news and I've got some bad news. The good news is you still have maybe a week or two to buy tickets to the Brooklyn Podfest. When I said you may have a week or two, I'm going to show you what Brendan did. Like this. He did one of those where he shook his head back and forth and was like, I wouldn't promise that. We are now down below to what? 1/4 of the seats left? A little bit less. A little bit less. If you want to purchase a ticket to see the Majority Report live on January 13th at the Bell House, you need to do so very, very quickly, ladies and gentlemen. You can head over to majority.fm. You will get details there. Pick up your tickets. Also, there's been some confusion. For the next couple of, next week or so, you can purchase justcoffee.coop coffee for 30% off. You do not need to use a coupon code majority. You do not need to do that. They're having a special promo, 30% off. This is the time where you go there and you buy the Majority Report blend because you've never tried it before and you want to see if it's as good as we've been saying it is, because it is. Free shipping, 30% off. Buy a 5-pound bag if you're smart. Unless you're like one of those people like, I have to have my coffee incredibly fresh. I can't have a 5-pound bag. Or if you own a store, there you go. Boom. So check that out. Michael?
February 1st, Bell House, Michael Brooks Show. Tickets, we're at the halfway point, and with February 1st coming around the bend, so get those tickets quickly as well. Michael Brooks Show on Patreon, patreon.com/TMBS to get everything. Our YouTube channel and iTunes. Thanks.
Who was on this week?
This past week, Mike Racine was on. Very funny comedian. We did a lot of Dave Rubin impressions. He has a great Dave Rubin impression.
Does he really?
He really legitimately has a
out.
great Dave Rubin impression. He caught it. He said he's a South Park character.
Yeah, you need to do him like a South Park. Yeah,
I'm
what? That's interesting.
That's interesting. I'm interesting ideas. He nailed it. We had a great time. George H.W. More like George H.W. Bad was the title. And next week, Matt Taibbi in studio.
Oh, I should also say, Jamie will talk about the Intifada, but I want to just do this in the fun half of the program. I am holding a mug. I think I have an idea who gave it to me. For Hanukkah, I guess it was a Hanukkah mug. It says, "Ask the Moms," and then a tiny majority.fm right there. So Ronald Reagan, I think, was responsible for this.
Maybe.
Ask the moms.
Ask the mom. It could have been. It could have been Mindy, but I think he's already got these up at his redirected, seamless page or whatever. I don't know what it is. Threadless or whatever it is. I don't know what it is. But yeah, he said something was on the way, and I was a little bit worried. And he was like, "Don't worry, it's practical. I know that you need a practical gift." And so, Jamie, what's happening on the Intifada?
Yeah, so this week on the Intifada, out now, Sean and I recap our magical trip to Mexico, including our visit to the autonomous Zapatista community of Oventique. And we talk about the, that's very nice, the amazing experience we had there and the beautiful way they govern their society along horizontalist principles. Also this weekend, we are recording an episode with Justin Akers-Chacon, author of a book called Radicals in the Barrio, Magonistas, Socialists, Wobblies, and Communists in the Mexican-American Working Class. And it was partially inspired by the bad take that Angela Nagel published that made everyone mad a couple weeks ago, but it's something I'd been meaning to do for a while. So
you waited till Michael went to the bathroom before you said that.
Oh, is he in the bathroom? I didn't notice.
Matt.
Tonight, finally, me and my friend Chris are going to talk about Democracy in Chains.
Finally.
We're going to talk about James Buchanan and if he's sort of like a libertarian Machiavelli or if he's a libertarian Forrest Gump.
Wow, nice. All right. All right. Quick break. Oh, wait. Have we started on, Brendan, are we on Pandora yet?
I believe so. You download the app.
Yeah, folks, if you ever, we're on Pandora. If you want to check out, if you have Pandora, check out the Majority Report. I think we just one of the early invitees onto Pandora. It's just us and NPR and some of the other little players.
We're taking them down.
Some of the little players. I think we could be one of the few independent news podcasts on Pandora. Show them.
Get our numbers up if you got it.
Let's see NPR do a show on, postal banking as like the most exciting part of the episode.
I mean, the people I've talked to that have worked at NPR are all jealous of the type of content we get to do here. So
is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Boom. All right, quick break. Head into the fun half. We'll be right back. They have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude, you want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 8s. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey! Shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
we are back. I mean, I was just saying, and I don't want to get into this again, but we're looking at a similar dynamic in the Democratic primary as we saw in the Republican primary to some extent. The difference between a Republican primary and a Democratic primary is that you can monetize being in a Republican primary a lot more than you can in a Democratic primary. So you get people like Newt Gingrich or, I can't remember now, the 666 guy. And
Herman Cain,
and a whole slew of people who can monetize these things. And there's still, I think, the dynamic of like, I'm a governor and I'm not very popular in my state and I'm going to run and then I'm going to get energy secretary or something like that. You raise your profile, you barter something off. But the bar to entry drops when you get above like 8 or 9 candidates who are going to throw in, because it's impossible for you to be the loser. Like no one talks about the people who didn't beat Donald Trump except for maybe, Jeb Bush.
I think Jeb Bush and Scott Walker, because they both flamed out. I think Jeb Bush and Scott Walker, because they both flamed out so spectacularly, it did have an effect on them. But yeah, besides that, totally.
Yeah, but Jeb this was an all or nothing. I mean, he was almost out of politics anyways. Scott Walker, I think, he could have won re-election. Right? I mean, it's
a close race.
And that's what has done him in more, is that Donald Trump won. I mean, had Hillary Clinton won, it might have been a different situation for Scott Walker. But when there's that many people in it, there's no loser in the way that like Clinton lost in 2008 and John Edwards lost in 2008, because they were the three biggies.
Or Martin O'Malley.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
that was pretty disastrous.
Yeah, but
I hope it's like the dynamic of the Republican primary, in that it's a bunch of establishment, boring people getting owned by a loudmouth outsider.
The problem is that when Bernie is on the stage with 12 other people or 15 other people and only has a small amount of time to speak, because the message, it's going to be easier for other people to hide the ball.
Can you imagine, though, if Bernie was using like Trump-style insults on all the Democrats?
That would be totally awesome, but it won't work because Democrats suck. But that would be great. Remember, what was the one we came up with yesterday, Matt? What was it?
For who?
Bernie be like, Hillary shitting, everybody. Hillary shitting.
But I mean, just this is going to be the dynamic. That's why a guy like Beto O'Rourke has a good shot.
Hey, Beto, you
in
fall
a
off your
field
skateboard?
of 20 people. He's going to have a good shot because it's really going to be like you're going to be defined in an era of you go on stage for these debates, let's say, and you're going to get 6-7 minutes of talking
time.
What about the
alternative? I mean, I think you're totally. I mean, I think that's compelling. On the other hand, a bunch of centrists and then one, presumably Bernie, but say it's Warren, like one candidate that has any type of actual left position stands out in a clustered.
I'm saying
I understand they can hide the ball in debate.
Yeah,
I get
exactly.
it. I get it. I understand. But I'm saying even more broadly, like, not just with debates, just the whole dynamic of a race where the left has an opportunity to coalesce under one clear candidate who is better than a whole glut of Joe Biden, Beto O'Rourke.
Yeah, but
Kamala
that's a
Harris.
perspective that you have because of Bernie. But like, I think
What do you
Joe
mean?
Biden.
I don't know what you mean.
I'm saying like people like Joe Biden supporters are like, it's going to be obvious. Everybody's going to cluster around Joe Biden.
They don't think the left is going to cluster
I think plenty of
around
people
Joe
might
Biden.
cluster around Joe Biden, but I'm saying people, but people are going to be fighting for a certain part of the real estate.
Yes.
In the center, relative to the left, if it emerges like that.
Well, but I don't think that you're assuming it's going to break down on ideological grounds.
I'm not. It's a possibility. It could just be pure identity stuff.
Well, it's not
totally
just identity stuff. It's going to come down on things like resume. It's going to come down on like I've been there before, or I can beat the.
If it's just campaign capacity and resume, then Joe Biden's going to be the nominee.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
That's totally possible.
We'll
and I think Joe Biden
is that second mic on. I'm getting like an echo or something.
Use that mic instead.
Okay.
Yeah, that one's a little bit too. There we go. I don't know why it was doing that.
I'm just scared that Bernie and Warren would split the progressive vote, and I
don't think they're going
strengthen
to,
the
though.
centrists.
Yeah, I think only one of them is going to run. I doubt they're both.
I'm afraid they're both going to run. And it's going to be a total shit show.
I think it's possible that they both run.
Wow.
I don't know that they would be in for very long, but
dip their toes. Dip my toes.
I honestly don't think Warren has much legs as a candidate, to be honest.
I see this happening. I see it very clearly, and I hope that I'm wrong. But like, everyone's going to feel, all the Democrats are going to feel really good about Elizabeth Warren because she's like a compromise between all the Hillary people who want a woman and all the Bernie people who want a progressive. And then she's going to lose very badly to Trump.
Well, she's not going to get the nomination.
Well,
so don't worry about that.
All right, let's go to a 210 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good afternoon, Sam. It's John from San Antonio.
Hello, John from San Antonio. Just the man we wanted to hear. Are you going to weigh in on this conversation, or are we going to blissfully not talk about 2020 right now? Sorry, we got hooked into that.
Well, actually, I was been surprised, pleasantly surprised. Yeah, let me go ahead and open up with. I mean, I got some Beto talk if you want to hear it, but I mean, it's not my first priority. So the only race in question now is the House of Representative in North Carolina's 9th, and I'm going to talk about my most flippable district list. I called in on November 5th, a few weeks earlier. I was talking about how the top 18 races were very likely to flip. You were skeptical. The next week I went over some races, and you seemed a little bit more accepting. In the end, I got the first 31 races right, and 41 out of the top 46, or it could be 45 if they call a new election, flipped. So I didn't list my final numbers on Twitter, but I missed 16 out of 435 or 434 if they have a new election, which is 96% correct. So I'm going to be taking down.
Is that 96%, or are you rounding up, John?
Yeah, it's actually a little bit higher. It's actually 97 point. Yes, yeah. So I mean, I'm giving right. Okay, so I'm going to be taking down that pinned tweet and putting up a Medicare for All tweet thread with Massachusetts at Amherst Professor Robert Poland, featuring the conversation at the Sanders Institute. And Poland put out the most extensive peer-reviewed study that had been praised by top medical economists from the most prestigious universities in America. The top loan most people are talking about is the 5.1 trillion that the study could be saved over a 10-year period. On Monday, I called in to talk about the differences that Poland has with the funding mechanism and how it compares with the funding in the Bernie Sanders white paper that came out in September 17. The main difference is that Poland puts a 3.75% tax on non-essential purchases, and Bernie has a 4.0 Medicare tax on each working household. The current rate being taking out of every working person paycheck 1.45. A YouTube commenter described our conversation saying sales taxes are regressive. Duh. But I wasn't trying to be simplistic. I do feel that we need to fight against the national sales tax and that we would hurt the most vulnerable and seniors. After my call, Michael mentioned what items would be considered necessities, exceptions from taxations, and their food, beverages consumed at home, housing and utilities, education, and nonprofits. The researchers include that a 3.75 income tax credit for families currently insured by Medicaid. And I also think that, this is my personal opinion, that soap, shampoo, toilet paper, and other hygiene products should also be included, as well as diapers. Another caller was talking about how doctors would be affected and how this is going to be one of the big concerns, considering physicians in Europe make considerably less than American doctors, and then no one wants to take a pay cut, which is a really important factor. Poland lays out the case. Medicare for All will increase overall demand by 12% for health care services. However, this increased demand for services should not create significant shortages in the supply of health care provides, even in the short run. This is primarily because Medicare for All physicians will be able to have reduce the amount of time they have to spend on administration and correspondingly increase their billable hours.
Right.
The increase in billable hours will be an average, roughly compensate physicians having to accept uniform Medicare payments because Medicare-based payments are lower than those paid by private insurance companies but higher than those paid through Medicaid. And so the physicians that will benefit the most from Medicare for All are general practitioners and emergency room doctors, and the ones that will be affected the most will be the specialists, certain specialists,
right.
Not cardiologists. So do you want to comment on any of that? And if you want to give me more time,
the only thing I would tell you
address...
that I think my sense is that people notice their payroll taxes a little bit less than they do. Deductions seem to be a little bit easier to accept than actually shelling out more. And if you do it by sales tax, there is an incentive for the stores, for the retail outlets to make it clear that they're not charging it, right? Like you get your Verizon bill and there's like 14 different, like this is the surcharge for this and this is the surcharge for that. And that's the cost of doing business, right? Like I don't, send out like, hey, this is the rent you're paying for my office. If we were to do, I don't know, the billing of our podcast that way.
Do an itemized podcast.
Yeah. But so I tend to, in addition to the regressiveness of even a non-essential, sales tax. But everything else, I think that's the case. You're going to see specialists. Some of the top in the field they're gonna take a pay cut to a certain extent. They'll probably also stay outside the system on some level, and just some amount of them will just service the ultra rich. But they're essentially doing that now, anyways. To a large extent. And so I think all of that, everything else tracks. But we'll look for that pinned tweet.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
What they were saying at the Sanders Institute is that they're really pushing that there will be no private insurance. They're all of like the Roseanne Morrow and, what Bernie says, in this white paper and also in the polling report, that essentially there will not be any. And they talk about that pretty extensively in many panels, that, this is what's gone wrong in Europe, is that they've gone away from single payer and gone towards, this kind of hybrid. And this is also what... who's the guy that Joshua, the guy who writes for The Nation that you interviewed last year?
Josh
He
Holland.
was talking about yeah, and so you can see it in in the Swiss model, and also in the Dutch model, which have the highest levels of GDP.
They were
so they're
never
really
single payer to
saying no,
begin
there
with,
will
though.
be no outside.
I don't think
this will be covered. And so, we'll see how that, if,
I would be very surprised if there wasn't an option, just from a political standpoint.
The Swiss were never entirely governmental to begin with, as far as I understand. I actually think, I think France and UK are, and they've been injecting all sorts of private providers into NHS going back to Blair. But the Netherlands and I think the Swiss have the closest to Obamacare. It's much better, but that has the most market activity.
All right, John. Appreciate the phone call.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you, Sam.
Well, I think I know who this is.
He was at over 97%, Sam.
I didn't want to say anything, but I think it's closer to 95.6. But whatever. I'm not gonna. Ronald Reagan, is this you? Calling from a 509 area code?
Hey, I'm here with my wife. Actually, you want to say hi to my wife?
Sure, Mrs. Reagan. Thank you for the cup. Is it from you? Hi.
How are you?
No, it's from me. She doesn't really know who you are.
Oh,
actually.
yeah. You're just. Are you just proving her that you're, whatever it is that you're doing in your so-called office is actually you're actually just listening to the computer?
She's nodding aggressively. Yeah.
Could you imagine you're sitting in Ronald Reagan's office and you're waiting to see if you can be protected from the machinery of the American terrorist bureaucracy of immigrants, and you just hear through the door a John from San Antonio impression?
Yeah,
that's your attorney.
Or
Yeah.
if I always imagine Ronald Reagan being like this to his client.
Just one.
I'm still on hold. Hold on 1 second. Just give me one.
I'm actually in the middle of a consultation right now. I just give him I just hold up my index finger.
I'm sorry. Don't mean to.
Hold on.
Don't mean to.
I got to take this.
Don't mean to hold up. So what's on your mind? Thank you very much for the mug. I love it.
It's great. It's awesome.
It's I love the size and the heft of it. It's great.
It's a real mug.
Mm-hmm.
Ask the moms.
Thanks. I know you don't usually talk about true crime, but have you heard about this guy Sam Little, who was arrested? He's a 78-year-old man. He was arrested at a homeless shelter, and he's confessed to over 90 murders.
Oh, geez,
making him perhaps the most the word is totally
prolific.
escaping me, but he's killed a lot of people. Prolific, yeah. Serial killer, and maybe in history.
This
certainly
is in
in
Texas,
American
right?
history.
Is he in Texas? Is that where he is?
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, and I was reading some of the details actually of what happened and everything, and it reminded me a lot of what the DNC did to Bernie, actually.
Really? Do tell.
Yeah. They just seem really. They just seem different. It's like a difference in degree, but not kind. You know what I mean?
No. You're suggesting it's like instead of killing 90 people, maybe they killed like 9.
Right. Exactly. That's pretty much it.
All right.
Have a good one.
All right. Appreciate the call. Ronald Reagan's wife just going, have we seriously been waiting here for an hour for you to do that?
I have no idea literally what's happening. But what is yeah. That's a disturbing story. I guess I'm still not over that. That's really fucked up.
A guy killing a lot of people?
Yeah. I love mafia stuff, but I hate serial killer stuff.
Yeah, I avoid it too.
Yeah.
Calling from a 240 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Sam, is that you?
Yes, it is. Who is this?
This is Vito from Maryland. How are
Vito from Maryland. How are you? What's going on?
So, would you rather talk about the Postal Service or the 2020 primary?
Postal Service.
And everyone else would go 2020 primary.
All right. So, I worked for the Postal Service for quite a few years. Actually, your diagnosis earlier was actually spot on as to the reasons for the financial difficulties. It stems almost exclusively or primarily from the requirement to pre-fund all of the, the retirement, all that stuff in advance. But I mean, the attempt to sort of promote the slow undoing of the Postal Service begins all the way back in 1970 or so, when it had the strike, and then the Postal Reorganization Act of 1971, which basically is when it moved from the Department of the Post Office, essentially a federal agency, to the Postal Service. And I think at the time that was under, I guess, Richard Nixon, but I think sort of what they were hoping was that, they would do this reorganization and the Postal Service wouldn't be able to sustain itself simply on sales of stamps or whatever, and then they could quickly move to privatize. And I think they weren't really counting on how efficient the Postal Service actually is.
Right. Interesting.
But yes, that's true. And so, so that's basically, this is one of those things where they've been trying to sabotage the Postal Service for many, many, many years. And but yes, your diagnosis, that's pretty much spot on. And I expect probably more of the same type of stuff to come through. I'm no longer with them. I'm with a different agency now, but yes,
Well,
just a little bit of background.
It's also another reason. I mean, postal banking in and of itself, I think, is a great idea. But it's also,
absolutely.
Once you lock that in, the post office is.
Takes care of the funding question.
Well, just takes care of the funding question. It takes care of the institutional integrity question. Like, you can't mess with it now. It's just doing too much for too many people, and there's just too many people who are invested in it. And I think to a certain extent that this is another example, in some respects, of how universality ends up being a sort of like the best form of insurance of the integrity of the system. It's just like, because they can come back with this report, but they're going to be hurting rural people. And the people most inclined to cut this are most dependent on rural people for their votes. And there's really not a lot they can do. I mean, there's a lot they can do to undercut it, and they can hurt morale and whatnot. But this is the Postal Service. The U.S. Postal Service is like, when people talk about, do you want the government to run something? And it is. Let's be clear. It is self-funding, at least to the extent that it would be. Maybe not necessarily running a profit, but it would certainly be self-funding if they didn't have this requirement that was imposed by a Republican Congress on their way out the door in 2006, I think it was. This is a perfect example of how you want the government to run something, because they're doing stuff that a business would not do, that would not make sense for a business to do. And they're doing it because job one is not profits. Job one is provide service. And so that's why they do stuff that is unprofitable, but that's not the measure of what a government service does. And so appreciate the call, Vito.
But what about what in your life would be affected if we got rid of the post office?
Right. One other thing is that postal banking, by the way, was one of the major issues in the collective bargaining negotiations a couple of years back. The four major unions in the Postal Service bargain their national agreements every 4 years, and that was one of the issues brought up at the bargaining table. Was that the unions put forward as an idea for the Postal Service to be able to generate more revenue and become more profitable, as opposed to, trying to cut salaries or benefits. So that was one of the arguments that they brought to the bargaining table against management several years back, was the whole postal banking thing. But it didn't fly at that time. But anyway, all right. Thanks.
Appreciate the call, Vito.
Do you know why they have 4 unions inside the Postal Service instead of 1?
Well, I would imagine there are letter carriers. There are probably maybe people who drive trucks. Different issue
parts
sets.
Of the supply chain.
Yeah. Calling from a 478 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, Sam. This is Jeff in Georgia. How are you?
Jeff in Georgia. What's on your mind, Jeff?
Real quick, I just want to tell you, I don't know if it came up at all. That was Peter Baker. Your folks were asking about that. He's the chief White House correspondent for the New York Times.
On with Chris Matthews?
He ain't just nobody.
No, it
yes,
was
sir.
not.
Yes,
it
sir.
Was
It's
not.
certainly.
It was definitely not. It was.
It wasn't. I
Peter
looked it up. His
Emerson.
picture looks just like that guy.
Peter Emerson.
Who is Peter Emerson?
Oh, excuse me.
Peter Emerson is just some
Oh.
dude. I think he's probably
asshole.
like a Democratic consultant, which means.
How the hell does he get on MSNBC?
He's not even the most popular Peter Emerson.
No, he's not even like.
He's not even the most popular Peter Emerson in politics. It was the Irish one that's more.
It's almost like the people they allow
I'm sorry,
on TV
I was
don't
foiled
represent
by the
people in the real
multiple
world.
Peters that appear on Hardball frequently.
Yeah,
I'm real sorry about that. I tried to do my homework for you and I failed you.
He's in a wetsuit.
I held my head and sang.
Wow. He's a founding partner of CAPE, a company that provides political and public policy expertise, strategic communication. I wonder who his clients are, right? I mean, that's basically what it comes down to.
Oh, and he's an aquanaut.
I mean, he doesn't sound like
SEAL.
the kind of guy with the sort of animal charisma and sexual energy as a podcast host. That's what he doesn't sound like to me, Sam.
Right. No, of course not. Of course not.
Listen, man, I did want to say something kind of serious that I did do my homework on a bit better, I know. Just want to say a few words about talk about promises made by liberals for various political and social reforms. I agree with you. We should definitely be making them to hold those promises. But I really think that liberals, as a historical sense, as reform-minded institutionalists, often members and supporters of the ruling class itself, throughout history, there have been times when they've promised social and political reforms, even good ones that people call adequate contemporaneously, and did. And through either duplicity or incompetence or circumstance, each one of which has happened many times, when they haven't delivered, one of two things always happens. Either extreme state-based repression or revolution. In the United States, we're not primed for a left-wing revolution of any kind. If we're going to have a revolution, it's going to be a right-wing authoritarian one. And so I really do think agency in America belongs in the hands of liberals. You either need to get on board with universalized, socialized programs, or the game is up. Because there's no one to come save us. There's no empire to come invade us and liberate us, right? If we go down, it's over, Sam.
Yeah, well, these people have the illusion that the center can hold and we can continue the way we have been going without something calamitous happening, and that's just not true.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think that assessment. I don't. I mean, it's hard. Look, it's hard to prove that. I think, but it's certainly a legitimate potential. The other argument for these programs is that they're better, but the question then becomes, either way, is like, how does the left, like, is it going to be, who are we convincing, right? Like, those establishment figures are not going to become convinced. I don't think. On some level, there has to be more from on the left to sort of create that environment. I mean, so, when Jamie says wildcat strikes, I mean, I don't know we're going to go from where we are now to wildcat strikes, but
there are no shortcuts. It's not going to happen overnight.
No, right. There are no shortcuts. But my point is that, when I was talking to those teacher union folk over the summer, there was a lot of them who were like, I am reevaluating our failure to use strikes as a, that we were too parsimonious in our use of those.
But and there's a distinction right there, not to cut in, but just what you're pointing to. And you see this very clearly in the UK with how people in labor respond to Corbyn, in the sense that there are some, and, whatever, there's variance in politics, and that's fine. People have some different ideas. But there's definitely people in labor who are like, they came of age politically in the 80s and 90s, and they thought a certain type of agenda was impossible. And now that they see that it's possible, they're actually pretty happy, because they really do have some pretty genuinely labor-oriented left politics. And then there's like the Blairites, who are really center-right. Just that's their politics. And I think that, a lot of that's getting mushed together right now in these arguments because I think I want to definitely show centrists or whatever that, no, guys, I think this is the right thing to do. I think it's the winning thing to do. And I think we could build coalitions around it. But I think there are other people who they don't have the same policy set, and they're willing to just be relentlessly cynical and trying to undermine it. And so we have to disaggregate who we're dealing with.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, perfect example, right? You saw street graffiti in France during the election that said Macron 2017 equals Le Pen 2023. Did I get that right? 2022, when the French election is. Anyway, we're seeing that happen right now. Like, he did not provide stability. He did not solve the problems using technocratic liberalism. He provoked a huge backlash, much of which is going to come from the right in a terrifying way.
Right. I don't.
Yeah, and I just also think that in terms of the election, it's you can fight against it all you want, but inevitably it's going to come down to like people who are for Bernie versus everyone else. Even if we're for Bernie because he embraces these socialist policies.
What if he doesn't run?
Quote unquote around socialists. Well, if he doesn't run, then whoever inherits his mantle, which I think
who's that
will inevitably come clear.
I would go pretty hard for a Sherrod Brown or Elizabeth Warren over the other picks, to be honest with you. I would.
I think Sherrod Brown, I'm not sure Sherrod Brown really wants to be president, but I think he's a strong contender too.
He's doing his hair now.
But I think even if somebody is just going to be a legitimate progressive liberal, that is still a significant upgrade that I would work hard for.
Right, right. Well, but I think that's the point too. Then with making it about a couple of issues.
But on the other hand, I think Bernie, Cory Booker's proposal on baby bonds is amazing. That's one of the most impressive, innovative policies that I've seen. But I fundamentally I will vote for him if he's a nominee. But there's a higher barrier to entry with Cory Booker. Look, I know his career. I know his donors. I know what his politics are. I'm extremely skeptical of him.
Yes, but
that's kind of obvious.
But that's an example of what Dayen was saying, was that you're assessing his policy as I like that policy, but it shouldn't be that way. It should be pick a couple of major policies that you're bringing the entire array of candidates.
No, I get that
to.
point, but my point is that Cory Booker has already. I mean, actually, it's funny because I think what sort of missed me with Dane's point is I think that's actually already happened on things that we've been working for, like Medicare for All. All of the main contenders right now, except I guess for Biden, have come out and co-sponsored Bernie's bill. So we're already in the phase of actually having to look at who do I really believe, based off of their donors, based off of their alliances, based off of their voting histories, are actually going to do this. So, I mean, Of course, it's dialectic. You have to do both. But the idea of pretending that this is just some type of like, yeah, we're all at an equal starting point and we can assert these policies and see where everybody goes without evaluating where people are coming from politically, I think is just naive.
Yeah, who they get their money from is incredibly predictive because that's who they're beholden
That's
to.
exactly what I was just about to say. And if for some reason Bernie doesn't run, then the inheritor of his mantle, that will be the clearest way to tell who that is.
Who's funding them? Yeah.
The one that adopts his fundraising model and utilizes his base in the same kinds of ways that he did.
I hope so. I hope you're right about that.
Already,
I hope you're right about that because Obama got a ton of small
But that's what we learned
donations.
from. But he also got the most from Wall Street. And I think that especially if you're in a very specific cohort, like Jamie and I, frankly, like early mid-30s, but you actually experienced Obama, I think that's actually a very good lesson in like that wasn't.
Did he get
good
that
enough.
in the primary? Did he get more Wall Street than Clinton did?
I know he did get a lot in the primary. I don't know
They
more.
were
But
both Wall
from
Street
the beginning,
candidates.
he got a huge amount of hedge fund and Wall Street money from the beginning. And I think that, and for what it's worth, I'll say it. Look at Elizabeth Warren. If we're talking about people, like, I have problems with her, but she's got skin in the game to show that she went up against some of the most powerful people in the entire political process and was on the other side of them when it was unpopular, not easy, and genuinely adversarial. And that is a demonstration. And you can't just replicate that just because you endorse a policy set.
Thanks for the call, Jeff.
I mean, bottom line.
Thank you for taking my call, man.
All right.
You keep talking.
Dissident peasant.
Like I've heard it from so many people that the best way to implement progressive change, social democracy, even move us closer to real socialism, is to work through the Democratic Party and realign it, at least as part of your strategy. That's what the DSA does. They have an inside-outside strategy. And if we're going to do that, and if we want to really make the Democratic Party a progressive party, a labor party, a party for the working class, we can't have a coalition with Wall Street and with people who represent Wall Street because our interests are never going to align.
Yeah, I agree with that. Calling from a 906 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
Hello?
This is Nick from Michigan.
Nick from Michigan, what's on your mind?
Well, first off, I just wanted to, I wanted to call in and thank you guys for, helping to expand my knowledge of left-wing and socialist politics. I happen to be a socialist myself, and I actually ran for local office this year during the election. I lost, but I got 23% of the vote in my village, so that's actually a pretty big win considering it's a very red district.
Good for
I'm
you.
in Jack Bergman's district.
Oh, my. Oosh. Okay.
Yeah. Well, anyway, the other day I was listening to Michael's show, and he had on Professor Richard Wolff, who was talking about Althusser and the impact of ideology on our capitalist system, and that got me thinking. So I was wondering, do you guys see the right wing's focus on their defense of cultural norms such as gender, race, religion, or their demands for political civility as a natural reaction on the part of our capitalist system to maintain conditions for the replication of its social institutions, because the left represents a change in or a reinterpretation of American social ideology, and therefore a change in the conditions under which these institutions exist. And is this another contradiction within capitalism in that in order to maintain these social institutions, it must maintain public trust and control over the ideology, yet it undermines that trust in its pursuit of profit and exposes its own ideological hypocrisy. For example, private prison corporations profiting from the media's fear-mongering by using it as an excuse to build what are essentially concentration camps, while at the same time, that sort of thing contradicts the American social ideology of being a nation of immigrants and causes cognitive dissonance within our population?
Well, I mean, the quick answer is yeah, I think so for the most part. Look, I don't know. I mean, maybe at one level it is. There are, yeah. I mean, maybe at the top level when you get to talk about the think tanks, they fundamentally understand that the emancipation of people across our society and making our society more egalitarian in terms of putting aside economics, but just in terms of like cultural values and the merit associated with skill sets and predispositions of different people and life experiences of different people fundamentally undermines the existing power structure. It's not clear to me that you couldn't still maintain capitalism, with those older institutions falling, but there's certainly more of a threat to it, right?
Right.
Because you're bringing in a different set of values, and one would be correct in being worried about it. And I mean, look,
right.
I don't know if it's a coincidence that Medicare, gets passed around the same time in our history as the Civil Rights Act. I mean, I've never, read anybody who's like theorized that, but one, it's not hard to imagine that as more people get invited into, the power structure, as the power structure becomes more diverse, that other ideas and expectations of what government should do, change.
Although those weren't, I think the balance is like, I think it's like, how specifically do you define it as like counterculture or not counterculture? Like I'm of the school that you take these movements for essentially civil rights across the board and you like assert them inside and are like counter hegemonic to them versus trying to say you're like trying to completely uproot and disregard them. So like, if you look at things like civil rights and even like Michael Harrington writing about the Other America at that time, that came out in the early 60s, right? Wasn't that part of the impetus behind like the war on poverty and things like that? The rhetoric and the politics of it was, we need this country and its discourses and its hegemonic ideas about democracy and about opportunity, which we all know are hypocritical and didn't live in any way up to its verbiage, but we actually need it to. We're going to like force it to. And so those movements were not like, they were positing like an enlargement and a redefinition, not like a sort of disregarding of those things. And I think that's
like
where
the all men are created equal thing.
Yeah. Okay. So really, let's do that. And I think that's where, and
But
that's where like the Gramscian ideas to me are a little bit more interesting than Althusser.
But if you make all men created equal, and regardless of what the rhetoric has been, if you actually do that, all people are created equal, it's, I hate to say it, zero sum. And someone is going to be losing power. And even if they're just losing it in a cultural sense, put aside for a moment economics, even if they're just losing it in a cultural sense, once you lose it in a cultural sense.
Yeah, that doesn't really
Well, this speaks to the limits of liberal values, right? Because a statement like all people are created equal could be used to support something very conservative and meritocratic and say, well, some people have more than others because everyone's created equal and some people work harder than other people do, right?
Originally was.
I guess
popular democracy affects how we interpret these things.
Right. And I guess also, if I understand your question correctly, which I don't know if I am, which I'm trying to speak to, I think those are good points. I think the point I'd have for you is I think that there are some things that are, and by the way, I think there are things that capitalism facilitates that are desirable in certain instances, right? Like for sure. But I don't think that some movements of Patreon.com/TMBS, desirable aspect of capitalism. I think though that like there are definitely some like social means of social progress that come along with capitalism that are good things, but they don't pose any type of fundamental threat to capitalism in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And I think that, so I think that's like, no, like marriage equality. Do I support it? Is it absolutely essential? Absolutely, no question. Is that something that's going to threaten the market system? Not at all.
Well, here's the thing: when you sever class politics from what we now know as quote unquote identity politics, you can have a progressive identity politics without having a progressive class politics. Now, everyone in this room knows that you cannot actually help the majority of women, minorities, etc., without redistributive programs economically. But I mean, I think is the question about the difference between the right and left wing approaches to these issues, because
the question was, as far as I know, was, are conservatives right to be afraid of social change as a threat to capitalism? And I think, like, let me put it this way.
Depends what kind.
Yeah,
well, yes, but I also think, but I think it's certainly understandable.
Goldman Sachs
for them.
doesn't care if you're gay. Like,
no,
but, yeah,
well,
not at all.
Well, and it certainly it seems to be more of a defense of social institutions, which are themselves a part of our capitalist system. Say, for example, the war on Christmas sort of thing, or the war on religion in a I guess in a broader sense, if you want to include the struggles of homosexual people and LGBTQ and all that.
I don't think in today's phase of capitalism that's true.
There are pros and cons to it for the ruling class, honestly.
Silicon Valley, Wall Street enabled capitalism doesn't care about that stuff.
No, well,
and can profit handsomely
they have
off of
no
it.
use for overt racism anymore and overt sexism, as long as they can still benefit from the fact that we have a permanently racialized underclass. Women get paid less than men. Those things are still enshrined. So why would they care about?
I'm not convinced that marriage equality doesn't in some way erode some of the underpinnings of capitalism.
How?
Insofar as it's going to have an impact, it's going to weaken the power of other institutions that I think maintain capitalism in our society.
If anything, it opens up way more opportunities for capitalism and markets. I mean,
well, that may be the case in terms of like, short term, but I think in terms of like the idea of religion becoming weakened, I think is.
You think religion props
capitalism
in America
destroys
in
religion?
World? Yeah, capitalism is totally junking religion across the globe today.
Capitalism is
in late stage capitalism,
co-opted parts of religion.
But in late stage capitalism right now, as it's constituted,
it's done a very good job.
I mean, the religious people I know are capitalists, though.
But it's not a driver of like global capitalism.
It dissolves in today's all world, social bonds, including those of old-timey religions.
Well, yeah, I don't know about all that.
I mean, I think I think Donald Trump got into office in the context of this country because of religious affiliations, right? I mean. That is the case. I mean, and I mean, I think that it's. I don't think that there is that capitalism helps religion necessarily at all. But I think religion is definitely, when you have a structure and a system that has a specific hierarchy and can be called upon to support. It's called upon to support, it seems to me, far more effectively capitalism than a rival to
the most powerful religious institution in the world. Like if you just had to pick one as an institution, not a religion, what's the most powerful religious institution?
Well, probably the Catholic Church.
Right. Listen to what the Pope says about capitalism and market policies and how that is nothing to do with anything that happens even in Catholic majority countries. It's totally disregarded.
I mean,
yeah, but I don't. That's not what I'm not. That doesn't. I mean, and I don't know that.
Well,
that
I mean,
disproves
people
my point at
disregard
all.
the story of Jesus and the money changers too.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
That doesn't mean anything. It's a question of like,
Well, no,
how
it
does capitalism
means a
use?
lot.
What does capitalism, use to promulgate itself?
But I
And-
mean, by that same token, I mean liberation theology. Religion can be used for anything.
Well,
I'm
no, I
saying
understand
that-
religion.
I'm
It's
saying-
a second order
Well,
thing.
that's
It's
yeah,
far
it's a
more
second,
successfully
it's a second
used.
order thing.
It's far more successfully used by capitalists.
Not necessarily.
I mean,
Depends where
we
you
would
look,
not have
but in
fascism in
today's-
this country if it weren't for white Catholics.
That's true. But in today's world, the Catholic Church, even conservative religious institutions, are opposed to, and sometimes we would be aligned with capitalists. I'm aligned with capitalists who want Saudi Arabia to move out of gender apartheid.
Well, Catholicism
But-
isn't the most powerful institution of religion in this country. I think in this country,
Well, I'm talking globally. I'm just saying there are plenty in today's moment. There's a huge amount of conflict where religious sensibility could run up against market logic, and market logic's always going to win. And
when we're trying to
that's not what I'm
decide
talking
about social
that's what I'm
progress,
talking
right,
about.
and whether or not the social, insofar as it can be divorced from the economic, is a kind of progress that's going to undermine the capitalist system. I think it's a bit like the tail wagging the dog. Like, I'm not a 100% materialist reductionist like some Marxists out there. I think it's more of a dialectic than that. There is some give and take between the two, but generally speaking, stuff like religion and the social sphere is the second order thing that follows based upon who's got the material power in the world, you know?
Right.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily, I think,
Or like-
dispositive of the idea that that the more egalitarian our institutions become, the more it weakens capitalism. Those are not. I mean, that's the point.
I mean, libertarians sure thought the expansion of voting rights was going to spell troubles for capitalism. Like, this is
but that
just
literally
demonstrably
does. That is.
Isn't that what we're talking about?
But it does, right?
Yeah,
I mean, but it does. I mean, that's
yeah,
why
capitalism and democracy. There's
it does.
contradiction
That's
between
essentially
them.
what
That's
drives,
why I made a
the
distinction in the
capitalist
beginning
system
between.
to capture the political sphere.
Well, I think there's a difference.
Is
though,
because
between
of the
changing
threat of
social
democracy.
Yeah.
Well, I think he's trying to to reckon with why certain formations of capitalism or neoliberal capitalism, like, I don't know, Obama centrism, can deal with equality for gay people, trans people, women, etc. You know, nominal equality within the system, and why more right-wing formations can't. Right?
But can Obama's brand
Exactly.
can Obama's brand fully deal with it, or can it just appear to deal with those and address those issues?
Oh.
Like, I don't think like Obama's capitalism could persist under a world where you leveled wealth.
Well, I was trying to make a distinction between. I guess what I'm saying is, I think because I would put things like voting rights in the democracy category, which to me automatically implicates the things you're talking about, Matt. But I would say, like, as an example, like, I don't know that but people getting the right to vote in the South and voting for a completely different economic agenda has a much more one-to-one relationship than people getting marriage equality.
Right.
Those are very.
Or what
different
about,
things.
but
very,
those
very
are,
different.
no. I don't think. I think they're indicative of the. I'm not saying they're indicative of emancipatory movements.
It's getting a place within the existing system.
Exactly.
A seat
But
at the table. You know.
Implications of certain social, like what we
Well,
watch
yeah, there's variance.
and accept on television could be, as an example, a great form of social and cultural progress does not have the same at all implications for how we design an economy as people in the South getting voting rights.
It may be the case.
I mean, that's a
that
stretch to equate those
I think that when we look back on if we're in a position in 30 years or 40 years of a far more socialistic society in America, okay? Because I don't know I can't track the emancipatory politics in other countries, but in America, we will see marriage equality as part of a decline of existing institutions that were the pillars of capitalism in this country. And I think
existed historically.
Yes, and I think voting rights are certainly, that's exactly that's how we started off by saying that Medicare, or I said Medicare and the Civil Rights Act, took place around the same time, because as you bring more people into the system and give them more power and more rights, which is what marriage equality is, right? It's a whole
there
set
were
of
radical queer activists who were opposed to anyone doing activism around marriage equality, because that was just going to bring this historically marginalized class of people, like some certain representatives, like the most well-to-do among them, into a system that supports.
In 2004, it was a massive, massive tool for the Bush to get reelected. And that tool is gone, and it was replaced in some respects by not something terribly different, an open seat on the Supreme Court, and that brought Trump in. I mean, so
the left and right wings of neoliberalism weaponize identity in different ways.
I agree, but I'm saying that I'm addressing the question of, does social change and emancipatory politics, putting aside for a moment economics, threaten capitalism? Are conservatives right to feel it? And I think the answer is yes. I mean, I think
not always.
Don't you think? I mean, just the last.
You know what?
Not always.
It's complicated,
right? But you shouldn't always be worried you're going to get hit by a bus if you run across the street. But in general, yes, it's a fear you should have.
And I think one really important thing that needs to happen is these struggles need to be connected back to one another. Class politics,
and they need
identity
to be
politics,
to the root cause of the inequalities in our system.
I would
appreciate
run
the call,
across
Nick.
The street. Don't worry about buses.
It's an interesting
I'd like
question.
to see you do that in Flatbush.
I think there's
actually, you should worry about buses.
I think there's something too when reactionaries throughout time have been called people agitating for women's liberation or black civil rights, to call them communists. I don't think they're completely mistaken about that. I think they actually do sense something very deep about capitalism.
Oh yeah, and the attack on the welfare state was completely racialized.
But you know the difference between and this is something Adolph Reed writes about. And this is where it's we can't equate all of these things. In the last couple of decades, there being some very necessary and positive and hugely important cultural advances in terms of what's some of them I could even marriage equality, set that aside maybe, but at the same time that there has been some major broadening of cultural agreements around rights for certain groups of people, and even just what is civically acceptable, which has of course been blown up by Trump, there's still a massive increase in inequality, including some very racialized inequality. So even by the time you get to Reagan, you look at the literature, schools are getting right back into resegregation levels of pre-civil rights. And on a policy level, it's actually moving in all the wrong directions, even as on a cultural level, there's a broader you know what, we do need to have more black sitcom actors. We do need to, and which by the way, those things are super important. I'm not saying
and help for social reproduction. Right?
Absolutely, it's not an either or, but it's very important to not falsely equate that just because those trends are moving in the right direction that they're working on the core economic levels. That's the point.
Yeah. The way I view it is you get those things out of the way because they need to be dealt with, and then it frees you up to focus on more things that we're focusing on.
I don't think it's
strategy, but I think
it's a little bit of a bank shot, but to go through. I mean, I agree with what Matt is saying in terms of you do those things because they're the right thing to do. They would not be the first
we all agree
arrow
with that.
you pull out of a quiver to undermine capitalism in some way. Although I think it's probably somewhat essential. I mean, you're not going to get. Maybe that's not true.
You basically deal with
socialistic thing that we had.
I think this is where I do agree with Jamie, though. There is absolutely a politics that says you do not have to deal with those core issues as long as certain areas of cultural replication and reproduction are represented and produced. As an example, a friend of mine who works in AIDS and activism related to LGBT teens, he said after we accomplished marriage equality, there was a massive drop-off in terms of donor support and interest in those issues, specifically of homelessness in that community.
Right.
That's what I'm pointing to.
I mean, two things. The enemy of our enemy is not necessarily our friend, right? Just because Republicans oppose marriage equality doesn't mean that marriage equality is going to be an economically progressive force in the world. And two, there's not a one-to-one comparison with most of these things. They are connected, but like it's not a straight line. Like we can't just assume that social progress is going to continue because that's the way it happens. I mean, we saw Weimar Germany was extremely socially progressive. People were able to be queer in public. And then, you saw what happened with the rise of Hitler, not that long later. And it's not exclusive to capitalist formations either. Like, unfortunately, the early Soviet Union was also very socially progressive. Alexander Kollontai was in charge of basically the entire social sphere. Women and gay people had rights in the early 1900s that they don't even have in some places now. And then Stalin rolled it way the hell back with his regressive version of communism. So I guess what I'm trying to say is they are connected, but it's not a given,
Right. All right. We got to start wrapping stuff up here, but I want to, this is Kelly Craft on CBC, I should say. This is number 5. Some of you may find this a little bit disturbing. I imagine if you were in Canada and you were watching this, I mean, I think they've seen some of this before, right? Haven't we seen this already? Isn't this old? No. Is this new?
This is new, I think.
She is the American ambassador to Canada. And I think I've seen her say this before. But her husband, that's the chaser, right? That's
guess what industries he's involved in.
Well, let's see if we can deign it from her expressions. Let's see. She is on CBC and sent to terrify Canada.
Do you yourself believe in climate change?
I believe there are sciences that are both on both sides that are accurate.
You believe that there's science that proves that man is not causing climate change?
Well, I think that both sides have their own results from their studies, and I appreciate and I respect both sides of the science.
Both sides of the science are accurate. The side that says man is not contributing to climate change and the side that says that man is contributing, I think both sides are accurate. What's that? You have cancer. I have cancer?
You don't.
But one cancer says I don't. I'm happy I don't need a third opinion.
It's a Heisenberg.
I'm going to hang out with those two opinions and I'm going to just see what happens. But in this instance, in this little playlet that I've done where one doctor tells me I have cancer and the other one doesn't, my husband makes a ton of money off of me not having cancer for whatever reason. Or in this case, the new ambassador to Canada from the United States, husband is a coal billionaire.
Of course.
So,
maybe the worst type of billionaire. I don't know.
That could be. It's up there.
It's up there. I mean, I think like the opiate, the Sacklers, are pretty bad
Sacklers
too.
Are pretty bad. Like actual vampires.
Yeah, I mean it's arguable.
Sacklers you could just put in like Chapo, like you could just say like they're just like cartel heads.
They're worse.
Yeah, they are worse. You're right.
Because like on some level, like
no, they are the absolute
people
worst.
buy the street drugs. They're assuming some measure of risk.
Yeah, that's the truth.
Right, and the thing is, even with coal, like you could make an argument that like, look,
still need to turn on the lights.
We need to turn on the lights, and this is what we had for a long time, and it was one of those things where it's like, I shouldn't have the dessert, but the real problem is I have like the whole pie
You
instead of a little
convinced
small
me.
little
I think
slice.
the Sacklers are the absolute
I think
worst.
the Sacklers, I gotta say, pretty close. And maybe you could say like, oh, we're the ones who developed like cluster bombs.
Did you
or
see
something.
the Sacklers have been moving to African markets? Did you see this?
Of course they are.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Of course they are. They're fucking. They are a personification of capital.
This is pretty funny. Mehdi Hassan was on Seth Meyers' program last night, and he is on the Al Jazeera. It's not the stream, right? It's
Al Jazeera English,
Al
AJE.
Jazeera English.
Yeah.
And here is making observation about how the U.S. press treats its politicians. It says something about competition, I think, but.
But what are the differences that you've seen in how the UK press and the US press deals with power?
It's a very good question, and I think you guys, definitely there's a cultural issue. You guys had your revolution, War of Independence, you kicked the Brits out, and yet, weirdly, you're more deferential to power, I would argue, than we are. The president walks into the East Room of the White House, and the White House press corps stands up, which I find British journalists, for all their sins, would not stand up if the Prime Minister comes into the room. They'd be lucky to even pay attention sometimes. You guys have this thing where it's kind of Banana Republic-esque, where you allow your politicians to have their job titles for life. So do you remember in 2012, it was Governor Romney. Governor of what? His backyard?
Yeah.
He hadn't been governor of Massachusetts for 5 years. Secretary Albright, Secretary Clinton, Mayor Giuliani, Ambassador Bolton. If anyone here lost their job, they wouldn't get to keep the title the next day after they've... Why do you do that?
Yeah,
Why do you do that with your politicians? It's weird. I just don't...
It's true. I mean,
That
on
is very
some
odd.
level, like, the Brits have the monarchy, and so it lets a little air out of the tires. This is sort of our, wanting part of that. Like, we don't have dukes, so we call them governor. And we don't have, sirs or, knights and kings and queens.
And they're even protected by the First Amendment over here.
There was actually,
Get
someone
after
asked
it.
me, somebody asked me if I had watched it was a former in-law, asked me if I had watched the George Herbert Walker Bush funeral, and I was like, nah, I didn't. And he thought it was because it was about Bush's politics, and I was like, yeah, no, I didn't. I'm not a fan of his politics, but I'm also like, what? Like, what? Like, he's in a mausoleum, and like, why do I don't, like, I'm not going to watch that. It's not.
No, I'd show up to some people's funerals that I don't know. I'd show up to Noam Chomsky's funeral.
Well, no, I'm not saying I shun the idea of funerals, but like, just because he was a president, it's not like I'm stopping everything I did. If I really like the guy, I might do it, but it's the implication of like, a former president has died. We got to shut the.
Well,
we got to shut the liquor
secular
stores.
religion.
We got to shut the
Yeah,
liquor
folks
stores.
got to
down.
get over
religion.
that.
I do like the idea, though, of Callous Sam. Like, Noam Chomsky was great, but whatever.
Yeah.
He's in the ground now.
Dust
What
to
difference does
dust.
it make to me?
Got errands to run.
All we are is
I've
dust
got
in the
errands
wind.
to run. I've got to test out the spring on my new Caspian mattress.
All right. Lastly, here's Donald Trump announcing the exciting news that Bill Barr, a smarter Jeff Sessions, will be nominated to the Attorney General spot. This is going to take months, so we'll see. I imagine this guy will get confirmed ultimately. And he's also going to appoint Heather Nauert. Is that how we pronounce her name? Nauert. UN ambassador. She doesn't have I think most of her experience in government has come from the Trump administration, but she was a former Fox News personality, so there's that.
So I'll be going to Kansas City. We'll be traveling to Missouri. I'm making a speech on law enforcement, very important subject. I want to confirm that Bill Barr, one of the most respected jurists in the country, highly respected lawyer, former attorney general under the Bush administration, a terrific man, a terrific person, a brilliant man. I did not know him until recently when I went through the process of looking at people. and he was my first choice from day one, respected by Republicans and respected by Democrats. He will be nominated for the United States Attorney General, and hopefully that process will go very quickly. And I think it will go very quickly, and I've seen very good things about him even over the last day or so when people thought that it might be Bill Barr. So Bill Barr will be nominated for the United States Attorney General position. I think he will serve with great distinction. I also want to inform you that Heather Nauert, somebody that we know very well, who's done a great job at as working with Mike Pompeo and others over at the State Department, Heather Nauert will be nominated. She's going to work with Nikki Haley to replace Nikki at the United Nations. She'll be ambassador to the United Nations. She's very talented, very smart, very quick, and I think she's going to be respected by all. So Heather Nauert will be nominated for the ambassador to the United Nations.
You know what strikes me now, like with this guy, it's like there's a quality of he's walking out and he's just wearing his underwear and he's pretending that he's fully clothed. Like it's just like why are we even going through? Why can't he just come out and go, Bill Barr, Heather Nauert, I'll see you guys later.
Well, he's still talking like he's on a reality show.
Yes, he still thinks there are people. I mean, I guess he knows that he's performing to his 30 or 40%, 45% of people, and that they still need a show.
He doesn't seem well.
No, he doesn't, though, right? Like,
no.
He kind of tells on himself when he's like, I didn't know him until very recently.
It really, like moments like that where he's really trying hard to come off as being sort of sane are when I think he's the most, like, not sane.
Like, even a year from now, I'm worried about what he's going to be like.
In a way, I mean, I'm not sympathetic, but it's kind of the most human. Because those are the moments where you're like, on some level, he's a narcissistic sociopath.
But he doesn't know what he's doing.
This is just an old man who's losing his ability to...
Well, he doesn't want to be impulsive. But he is impulsive. All right, folks. Sorry, we got callers on the phone. Can't get to you. It's already now the witching hour, ladies and gentlemen, of 3 p.m.
Oh my God.
Eastern. Time has flown by once again. It feels that way for the entire week.
Time flies when you're talking about dialectics.
Indeed.
Word.
We will see you Monday.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive,